Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
I am a force for good.
I am a force for courage.
And for calm.
I am a force for safety.
For fairness. For leadership.
I am a force for the future.
For compassion.
For my community.
I am a police officer.
And I am a force for all.
Be one of the 20,000 new police officers and be a force for all that you believe in. Search Join the Police.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge. Wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
India's second budget in 7 months left investors disappointed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's fiscal plan proposes tax cuts for individuals and wider deficit targets, but it fails to provide specific steps to fix a struggling financial sector, improve infrastructure and create jobs. Let's take a closer look with Scotiabank's head of Asia Pacific Economics, Tuli McCulley, joins us. Tuli, great to have you with us again. What was your assessment? What sort of report card, I guess, would you give to the measures outlined in the weekend's budget?
There clearly were expectations for more growth-stimulative measures. So in this respect, it disappointed many. But I think it highlights the government's challenge. The economy is weak and definitely needs support, but at the same time, public finances are also fairly weak. So there is not that much space for fiscal stimulus.
It's a tough situation for central bankers there too, right? Because the RBI, despite flagging growth, is not really expected to have the space to put another rate cut on the table this week.
Yeah, so I think the Reserve Bank of India will leave benchmark interest rates unchanged this week because there has been a fairly significant pickup in headline inflation recently.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are on the rise. European shares are gaining as well, following some steep losses at the end of the week. And as investors digest the latest developments in the coronavirus outbreak, we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 15 points this morning. Dow futures up 113. NASDAQ futures up 46. The DAX in Germany is up 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds, yield 1.53%. And the yield on the 2-year, 1.33%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.7% or 36 cents at $51.92 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.3% or $4.40 at $15.8350 an ounce. The euro 1.1063 against the dollar. The yen 108.53. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Trump prepares for tomorrow night's State of the Union address. It comes as Trump's impeachment trial continues in the Senate. Meanwhile, tonight, for the Democrats, the Iowa caucus takes place. The Kansas City Chiefs have ended a half-century of Super Bowl frustration. The Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 last night. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's get you set up for the trading day and week ahead. Joining us from New York, Bloomberg News Senior Executive Editor Jacqueline Simmons. In London, we're joined by News Director David Merritt. And from Hong Kong, we're pleased to have Editor Madeline Lim. And we'll start with you, Madeline, because Chinese trade Traders have gotten back from the extended Lunar New Year holiday to sell. Coronavirus certainly front and center.
Indeed, Nathan. Yes, good morning, everybody. It was quite a wild ride for Chinese markets today, which had been closed since January 23rd. So as you said, it was the first day for Chinese investors to react to the sell-off that we've seen in other markets amid the coronavirus concerns. At one point today, stocks were down almost more than 9%, and that was for the biggest decline since February 2007. We saw the yuan fall below 7 to the dollar, commodities such as iron ore drop, and bond yields tumble. And there's more selling to come since not everybody managed to place their orders. The authorities, though, have taken action and are expected to do more to stabilize the markets. Today, they injected some $21 billion in short-term market funds and lent those funds at a cheaper rate of 2.4%, down from 2.5%. And they've indicated that more stimulus will come if markets don't stabilize. The expectation is that the PBOC will also cut its one-year lending rate later in the month, and those stimulus measures is what stopped the riot from spreading to other markets such as S&P futures.
All right, turning to David Merritt in London now, where I imagine the big concern for investors there is what happens after Brexit between the now independent United Kingdom and the European Union.
That's right, yes. We're into phase 2 of Brexit. So the trade talks, that's what it's all about. Today, the European side and the British side setting out their red lines for these trade talks that are just about to kick off. And in a nutshell, it's really the Europeans saying, as they always have, look, you're going to have to stick with our rules if you want lots of access to the market. And the British saying, well, we're not going to do that anymore because we've now left. So these are the negotiating positions. There's going to be big fights over things like fishing rights, access for the City of London. No massive surprises today, just these big speeches laying out these political red lines. We'll have to see what in terms of the nitty-gritty what's to come in the negotiations as they pan out over the following weeks.
Phase 2 has interesting implications here in the U.S. I'll turn to you now, Jackie Simmons. Busy week on so many fronts here in the United States. Start us off with what's happening on the economic front.
Right. So we get the jobs report at the end of the week, and the expectation is that unemployment is going to hold steady at a 3.5% low. As for manufacturing, I mean, let's take what we can get. Just a reminder, and the end of the year was not pretty. Manufacturing closed out the year with the weakest monthly performance since the recession. And then we had two manufacturing behemoths last week, as a reminder, Caterpillar and U.S. Steel. I mean, in the first case, Caterpillar said that 2020 profit is going to trail analyst estimates, and U.S. Steel reported the worst loss in 3 years. So, I mean, let's see what manufacturing shows. But, yeah, we could get a mixed bag with everything plague virus sort of hanging over.
Yeah, also a key week this week for economic data in the UK, David Merritt.
Yeah, that's right. When we had some manufacturing data, a bit of a positive surprise actually this morning, saying that they avoided a contraction. We had some very bad numbers towards the end of last year, obviously amid all this political uncertainty, and the expectation is that resolving that, Johnson's big majority, is giving a boost to the economy. But of course, manufacturing not such a massive part of the British economy. We're going to get the services number later in the week. That's going to tell us whether, in fact, the Bank of England were right last week to keep interest rates on hold, and if we are seeing, in fact, a sustained uptick in the British economy.
And Madeline Lim, we're starting to already see some pretty eye-popping numbers on the economic toll that the coronavirus is having on China, specifically on oil demand.
Right. Oil demand, according to industry executives that spoke to Bloomberg, is down about 20% from what it normally would be this time of the year. That's perhaps not a surprise given that Chinese have shuttered factories for an extended period, cancelled flights, transportation systems in general are suspended, roads that are normally packed with holiday travelers are empty. And so that's perhaps not a surprise, but it has led people in the markets to talk about a possible demand shock, raised expectations that perhaps OPEC and its allies will bring forward discuss some support measures. We've seen Brent crude drop 10% since the start of this crisis, so we'll have to see how that plays out.
Jackie Simmons, we have got a lot of earnings reports to look forward to this week.
We do. So, I think tech has been showing some blowout numbers. We had Microsoft and Amazon. Now today we have Alphabet, which seems like they're going to show positive results, but let's watch their ad numbers and see what that brings. Also, I just, point out that China is still looming large over the car sector. Any company that has exposure to China right now, let's watch, because things are looking bleak already for that space in terms of quarterly production. And again, if you have plant closings and on the virus, that's going to not make things look much better. So let's watch and see.
Jackie Simmons, Bloomberg News Senior Executive Editor, with us from New York this morning. Also, our thanks to News Director David Merritt in London and Bloomberg News Editor Madeline Lim with us this morning from Hong Kong. S&P futures are higher by 14 points right now. Dow futures up 109. NASDAQ futures a gain of 45 points. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. markets appear to be shrugging off a big sell-off in Shanghai today. Stocks in China plunged almost 8%. For mainland Chinese investors, it was the first chance to trade in just over a week after officials extended the Lunar New Year break because of the coronavirus. Last week on Wall Street, though, the coronavirus worries hit stocks with the Dow tumbling 600 points. Lots of companies report their earnings this week. Today we hear from Google parent Alphabet. Others reporting in the coming days include Disney and Chipotle Mexican Grill. Later in the week, we hear from Uber, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Twitter. Bloomberg analysts say the coronavirus could send global jet fuel demand falling as much as 200,000 barrels a day this month because of travel restrictions. Meanwhile, the coronavirus outbreak is also expected to have wide-ranging impacts across technology, including negative effects on near-term corporate IT spending, an impact on iPhone production, and a risk to online travel agency growth. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu. Rich.
The UK has now left the EU, and we're in a transition period until the end of the year. Throughout this period, the government will be forging new partnerships with the EU and the rest of the world. This could lead to new arrangements for trade, travel, and business. To find out about the changes and how they might affect you, go to gov.uk/transition.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down, of course, in a used container. And then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Will cancer affect my sex life?
Your sex drive can disappear. The side effects may stop you.
Your sex life can easily stay.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 40 40. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
Otto Sergey now checks for better energy deals so you don't have to. Meaning we can all sit back and relax. Can't we, Sergey? Sergey?
Hey? What?
Tell the people that we can sit back and relax.
Oh, we can sit back and relax.
Oh, don't waste energy worrying about energy. Automate it with Otto Sergey. Compare the market. Keep life simple.
Customer preferences determine alerts based on tariff type, payment type, supplier rating, and minimum annual saving of £50.
As le boss, I expect only the best for my office. Air conditioning, super comfortable seating, digital radio, and rear parking sensors. From dealing with deliveries to balancing the books, my new Citroën van, my office on the move. Award-winning Citroën vans. Like you, they do it all. With £500 off during the February van event. Citroën. £500 discount inclusive of VAT on qualifying relay, dispatch and Berlingo vans ordered from 1st to 29th of February and registered by the 31st of March. Business users only. Full T's and C's at citroen.co.uk.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date in the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining after a sharp sell-off in China. The Shanghai Composite plunged 7.8% as investors hit the panic button in their first day back from the Lunar New Year holiday. Where the coronavirus are spreading as the death toll and confirmed cases accelerate. We get the very latest from Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
The number of cases has blown past 17,000 with more than 360 deaths over the weekend. You also had the first known case of a death outside of China. It was a 44-year-old man who had come from Wuhan and was visiting the Philippines. But I do want to put things into perspective that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently released data showing that this flu season, more than 19 million Americans have become sick with the flu so far, and that about 10,000 Americans have died.
In the meantime, Beijing is blasting the U.S. for its reaction to the virus. The foreign ministry says American authorities have inappropriately overreacted and not provided much help to counter the outbreak. This as the U.S. sends more flights to China's Hubei province to evacuate citizens.
As pressure builds to contain the outbreak, China is kickstarting a clinical trial to test a drug for the virus. A new antiviral drug from Gilead Sciences will be tested by a medical team from a hospital in Beijing. Shares of Gilead up 12% in early trading.
Well, S&P futures are higher by 0.4%. It is another big week for earnings. Nearly 100 companies in the S&P 500 are set to report, beginning today with Alphabet. Here with more is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
The quarterly results will be Alphabet's first since Sundar Pichai took over as CEO, and Bloomberg Intelligence says it should demonstrate continued momentum with mobile search, YouTube, and cloud driving sales. Alphabet may disclose cloud sales this year as the run rate tops $10 billion. That information may change the perception of Google's long-term growth story. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Larry, thank you. S&P futures are gaining up 15 points. Dow futures up 116. NASDAQ futures up 48. The DAX in Germany is up about 0.2%. So is the CAC in Paris. The FTSE 100 up 0.4%. 10-year Treasury down 8/32, yield 1.53%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.33%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 29 cents at $51.85 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down about 0.3% on $4.40 at $1,583.50 an ounce. The euro 1.1061 against the dollar. British pound 1.3062, and the yen is at 108.52. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. 6:33 on Wall Street, and the news update is brought to you by Land Rover. The only adventure sales event is happening now until March 31st. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport Land Rover Above and Beyond. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. This is a very busy week on the U.S. political scene, beginning with the Iowa caucuses today. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Going into today, it is all so fluid. All the polling shows there are 4, possibly 5 candidates who can come up on top. It is a larger than usual pool, and the outcome will give an indication of where Democrats may lean, to the left or moderate. Also today, final argument in the Trump impeachment trial with acquittal all but certain. House Manager Adam Schiff says he's going to make the arguments.
I'm not letting the senators off the hook. We're still going to go into the Senate this week and make the case why this president needs to be removed.
State of the Union tomorrow, final impeachment vote Wednesday, Democratic debate on Friday in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is demanding demonstrable evidence from the Taliban that they can and will reduce violence before signing a deal that would lead to Afghanistan peace talks and a withdrawal of American troops from the country. Pompeo says a deal is close, but they've been close before and the deal failed. As for the U.S. presence in Afghanistan,
President Trump's made no equivocation about our desire to reduce the American presence in Afghanistan. We're aiming to do that. We're working diligently to do that in a way that delivers on peace and reconciliation.
Pompeo spoke in Uzbekistan. Officials in London say a man strapped on a fake bomb and stabbed people on a street in the central part of the city yesterday. Armed officers shot the suspect dead at the scene. Deputy Assistant Police Commissioner Lucy Dorsey.
One man, who is in his 40s, was initially considered to be in a life-threatening condition. However, we are thankful that following his treatment at hospital, this is no longer the case.
Police say the suspect, 20-year-old Sudesh Aman, was recently released from prison after serving time for terrorism offenses. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. 6:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Good morning, Rob Bushka.
Good morning, Nathan. 50 years to be exact for Chiefs Kingdom since they hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. The number one offense in the NFL needed their defense to come up clutch in the waning moments of Super Bowl 54.
Second and 10, Garoppolo, shotgun snap from his 25. Five-man rush, winds up, long pass down the middle, leaping attempt, and it's a leaping pickoff, intercepted by Fuller, downfield, near the 42 of Kansas City.
Westwood won on the call. 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo intercepted twice as Kansas City beats San Francisco 31-20 in Miami. Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, at age 24, becomes the youngest Super Bowl MVP. One of his main targets, Sammy Watkins, was the reason why.
Stay strong, resilient. You know, we've been down many times. We just fought through it. We stayed strong. You know, it was ups and downs, flows of the game. Man, we just kept on leading, man. Everybody on this team, every player, every coach, man, we just kept on fighting, man. It's amazing.
Watkins averaged 20 yards per catch on 5 receptions. The Chiefs outscored the 49ers 21-0 in the fourth quarter. Patriots quarterback Tom Brady, in a Hulu commercial, told his fans he's not going anywhere. To the hardwood, the Bucs got 30 points, 19 boards from Giannis to beat the Suns. Raptors crushed the Bulls. James Harden had 40 as the Rockets took down the Pelicans, and the Pistons withstood a monstrous triple-double from Nikola Jokic with 39 points to beat the Nuggets in overtime. Golf, Waste Management Open in Scottsdale. Webb Simpson birdied the final 2 holes, forced a playoff, and then beat Tony Finau. Tennis from down under in triple-digit heat. Novak Djokovic wins another major. He takes care of Dominic Thiem in 5 sets. That's your NBC Bloomberg Sports Update. Nathan?
Thank you, Rob. And coming up on the economic front today, we get data on U.S. manufacturing. Economists predict the ISM factory index for January slumped to 48.5. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The ISM factory index has signaled a slump since August. In December, it dropped to 47.8, the lowest since January 2016. Orders and production declined at the close of last year, with almost all manufacturing sectors reporting contraction. Also on today's data calendar, markets factory PMI and the government's monthly report on construction spending. Bloomberg customers can find a full list of economic indicators by typing EcoGo on their Bloomberg terminal. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. It is just before 6:38 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
A 1988 climate warning was mostly right. I'm Justin Fox, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. On a hot day in June 1988, NASA scientist James Hansen famously told a Senate committee that he was 99% sure that greenhouse gas emissions were warming the planet. He also provided a set of global temperature forecasts that could help establish whether he was right. Those forecasts ran through 2019. The middle-of-the-road scenario that Hansen deemed most plausible turns out to have predicted a temperature increase 19% bigger than actually transpired. That's not bad. And a study published in December found that if Hansen hadn't today's levels of methane and chlorofluorocarbons in the atmosphere, his forecast would have been almost spot on. The same applied for all but 3 of 15 other global warming forecasts examined in the study. As one of the authors put it, gosh, maybe we know something about climate after all. I'm Justin Fox. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time, and terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. It's 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report. Here's John Tucker.
Fracta is a software startup based in Redwood City, California, that uses software to identify the weakest points in water pipes. Chief Executive Officer Takashi Kato says their technology lets cities, utilities, and construction companies pinpoint the decay of water pipes before they even break ground to fix them. It helps them save 30 to 40% of their long-term costs. Fracta combines artificial intelligence with machine learning and measures everything from soil quality to population density of an area, along with historical information on when pipes were installed and what they're made of. Boosting water use efficiency has become a global issue. In the United States, public spending on water utilities totaled $113 billion in 2017. That's according to the Congressional Budget Office. And that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. I'm John Tucker.
All right, John, thanks. Some other stories we're watching. U.S. health regulators approving the first drug for children and teens with peanut allergies. It'll be sold under the brand name Palforzia and marketed by Immune Therapeutics, which is up 19% in early trading. Job cuts on the way at Julius Baer. The Swiss private bank will eliminate 300 positions to create a leaner business with better profit margins. It's also dropping a target for net new money after missing its goal for last year. Shares down more than 5.5% in Zurich. Futures headed higher. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is a...
Where are we?
The New Forest.
But I thought we only had the Mini Countryman booked for a test drive. We can't stay here.
We're not going to.
This isn't exactly what I meant.
Relax. With Mini's new 48-hour test drive, you can use the Countryman for exactly what it's built for. Exploring. Plus, it's an SUV, the largest Mini in the range, so you can pack loads more in.
Great. Where next?
Well, you know how you've always wanted to try kayaking?
The Mini Countryman 48-hour test drive. Visit mini.co.uk to book yours. Mini. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only.
Will cancer affect my sex life?
Your sex drive can disappear. The side effects may stop you.
Sex life can easily stay.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 40 40. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA On Demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Presidential primary caucuses, with all 4 senators back on the campaign trail from the Senate impeachment trial. Steve Kastenbaum tells us the state is hopping.
The entire weekend, the candidates spread out across Iowa, holding dozens of events in every corner of the state. But last night, they were really concentrating, or some of them were, on the more heavily populated areas, especially here in Des Moines. And some of them were stopping by Super Bowl watch parties.
And what they watched was the Kansas City Chiefs beating the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 to become Super Bowl 54 champs. Chiefs head coach Andy Reid seems happy.
How about those Chiefs?
Stock futures showing healthy gains in the early morning hours as Chinese stocks plunge because of the coronavirus hitting China's economy. I'm Michael Toscano.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 6:47 on Wall Street. Futures are higher this morning. Let's go to the first word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. Like you said, U.S. futures are climbing after Friday's sell-off, with Dow futures up 124 points. S&P's gained 16, while NASDAQ futures rise by 50. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.54%. Gold trading higher by 10. And Shanghai reopened, plunged 7.7% overnight. Note the PBOC cut rates and injected cash into the financial system. European markets are also trading higher, led by gains in Italy. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 9:45, market U.S. manufacturing PMI, and at 10 o'clock, construction spending and ISM manufacturing. Regarding earnings this morning, Checkpoint EPS beat estimates. And in other news, a Gilead drug will undergo human trials in China to treat the coronavirus. Wrapping things up, KKR was raised to overweight at Barclays, Ulta Beauty raised to buy at Goldman Sachs, Nike raised to buy at UBS, and Navistar cut to equal weight over at Wells Fargo. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, thank you very much. Closing arguments are set to start today in President Trump's impeachment trial. With the trial's conclusion on the horizon, President Trump is now turning his attention to tomorrow night's State of the Union address. Meanwhile, for the Democrats, tonight is the Iowa caucus. A leaked recording of an exchange between an Iranian air traffic controller and an Iranian pilot Reports to show that authorities in Iran immediately knew a missile had down a Ukrainian jetliner after takeoff from Tehran. The missile strike killed all 176 people aboard, despite days of denials by the Islamic Republic. The Kansas City Chiefs have ended a half-century of Super Bowl frustration. The Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 last night. On the ice, the Capitals lost. In tennis, Novak Djokovic won the Australian Open. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. We're at 6:49 on Wall Street. Time to check what's going on in D.C., where political attention turns to Iowa for tonight's first in the nation Democratic presidential caucuses. Polls show Bernie Sanders surging to a statistical tie with Joe Biden for the frontrunner status. But Pete Buttigieg went on 3 of the Sunday shows you hear on Bloomberg Radio to make the case for nominating a Washington outsider to take on President Trump.
The next president, on day one, will be facing challenges that are different in kind than what we saw just a few years and certainly decades ago. I mean, think about where we are with global security, global health security challenges, looking at what's happening in China, cybersecurity challenges happening.
That was Buttigieg on ABC's This Week. One of his competitors, Andrew Yang, was on the same program. He was asked who his supporters might caucus for if he doesn't reach the 15% needed to qualify for delegates tonight.
Many of them have supported Bernie in the past, but many of them supported President Trump, and they might just leave. So there are a whole range of possibilities, and I can't speak to the minds of literally thousands of Iowans.
Following the caucuses, President Trump heads toward likely acquittal in his impeachment trial, with the Senate voting against calling witnesses. The president's lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, went on Fox News Sunday to defend his argument that delaying aid to Ukraine in exchange for political investigations isn't an impeachable offense.
The question was, does quid pro quo matter? And my answer is, it matters if what the president did is illegal or wrong. But if the president did something completely lawful, the fact that part of his motivation may have been to help his election cannot be the quid pro quo.
Republican Senator Lamar Alexander plans to vote against removing the president, even though he thinks delaying the aid was inappropriate. He tells NBC's Meet the Press.
I said he shouldn't have done it. And now I think it's up to the American people to say, okay, good economy, lower taxes, conservative judges, behavior that I might not like, call to Ukraine, weigh that against Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and pick a president.
Lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff tells CBS's Face the Nation, even if the Senate votes against removing the president.
I think by standing up to this president, as we have, by making the case to the American people, by exposing his wrongdoing, we are helping to slow the momentum away from our democratic values.
And that is some of what you heard on the political shows that air every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio. NBC's Meet the Press at 11 a.m. Wall Street time, Fox News Sunday at noon, ABC's This Week at 1 p.m., and Face the Nation from CBS at 2 o'clock. And for more, we welcome back Bloomberg Radio and Television Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli joining us live from Des Moines, Iowa, ahead of tonight's caucuses. Gotta ask, Kevin, is impeachment something you're hearing from voters as they head toward the caucuses as to a reason why they might head out tonight?
No, not at all. Mm-hmm. Look, I went to 2 rallies yesterday and I spoke with several voters. None of them listed impeachment as one of the issues that are driving them to the polls. They mentioned climate change. They mentioned the economy. They mentioned health care. And that's really, I think, why you're seeing Senator Bernie Sanders surging here in Iowa. Now, he's got big expectations. Should he not be able to pull out a win here in the Iowa caucuses, that would be really seen, any place but finishing in first would really be seen as a defeat for his campaign. Elsewhere, Joe Biden, can he finish in number 2 or can he pull out an upset? If he were to win this caucus, it would be seen as a massive sign of momentum for him heading into New Hampshire. If he were to finish in 3rd or 4th place, that would not be interpreted as positive developments for his campaign. Will there be a surprise? That's where things could get interesting. Remember, 15% threshold. That's the number you have to watch, because after the first ballot, for candidates who don't receive 15% of the votes, their caucus goers then have to decide where they will go next. So if you're Andrew Yang supporters, if you're Amy Klobuchar supporters, if you're Elizabeth Warren supporters in some of these precincts, that's where it really could get interesting to see who could pull out an upset victory.
Are you hearing about any wheeling and dealing going on between the campaigns to get some of those caucus goers to come toward a certain campaign if they don't meet that 15% threshold?
Nathan, that's such a smart question because that really is how these campaigns navigate through the final sprint, the fourth quarter here in Iowa. Now, there have been some overtures, and we talked about this earlier this morning, where you have Andrew Yang suggesting that his supporters would go to Bernie Sanders. That said, I got to be candid here. When I'm interviewing folks and voters here in Iowa, when I talk to Andrew Yang supporters, their number two choice is actually Pete Buttigieg. So this is where Iowa is a very funky political battleground in the sense that these voters take their jobs incredibly seriously. I was going through my reporter notebook earlier this morning, Nathan. I counted 6 voters who told me they were still undecided. I'm like, you've got to make up your mind. You've only got a couple hours left.
Still a big field, though. I got to ask about some comments that Iowa Senator Joni Ernst made to you and your colleagues at Bloomberg News in Des Moines, talking about what could happen if Joe Biden becomes president. How is that affecting the dynamic?
Well, I spoke with Senator Joni Ernst yesterday at a brunch, and she was very optimistic in terms of where she feels that the president would be reelected. She, of course, has been in lockstep with this administration, especially on a major issue here in Iowa, which, of course, is the ratification of the USMCA. Her and Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley worked on that, and the president had acknowledged as such. And she is really seen in Republican circles, especially in Iowa, as a kingmaker of sorts, just given the importance of the Iowa caucus, maybe less so in Democratic circles, but not less so in Republican circles. Joe Biden, I went to his rally last night, and it really had the feel of the Democratic establishment. Whether or not that's going to be enough to carry him to secure the nomination, we're going to find out, and we're going to cover it every step of the way.
And talk about what this could mean for momentum heading into New Hampshire, which has its own dynamics compared to Iowa.
Well, this is why Iowa truthfully matters. It's momentum, it's free earned media, and it's an ability to pick up the phone after a performance here in Iowa, heading into New Hampshire, and to say to your donors, hey, I still got a chance, I still got a prayer, I still got a fighting chance to win this thing. And for money, that's where, we talk about them as politicians, but they're also the CEOs of a campaign. And so for many of these candidates, Warren, Yang, and others, they're going to need to be able to say that their fundraising efforts are still viable. And that's where winning in Iowa or a strong showing in Iowa could inject some new life into their campaigns.
Just a few seconds left here, Kevin. What are the chances we get a clear winner tonight?
I think you'll get a clear winner. I think that all the campaigns are going to say that they won.
Right.
But hey, that's where us reporters got to stay out of the spin.
All right, Bloomberg Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli with us this morning from Des Moines. Ahead of tonight's Iowa caucuses, we will have full coverage here on Bloomberg Radio and television beginning at 10 p.m. Wall Street time with a special edition of Bloomberg Balance of Power. Also, we have a special edition of Bloomberg Sound On with Kevin Cirilli. Before the caucus voting happens, you can tune in for that at 5 p.m. Wall Street time here on Bloomberg Radio. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. And futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 17 points. Dow futures up 134 and NASDAQ futures up 51. The DAX in Germany is up 0.2%. The CAC in Paris up 0.3%. And the FTSE 100 up 0.5%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 1%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong gained 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 11/30 seconds. Yield 1.54%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.34%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.4% or 19 cents at $51.75 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.33% or $5.40 at $1,582.50 an ounce. And the euro at 1.1059 against the dollar. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Jonathan Farrell and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn.
First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. It would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/binit. Together, we can care for the environment.
Can you make a call given the data?
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In many of these countries, we're still seeing people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City, for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, China lashing out at the United States for, quote, overreacting after Chinese equity markets reopened to the biggest sell-off since 2015. Attention turning to Iowa caucuses with Senator Sanders leading the way. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Monday. Here is your Monday morning price action following the biggest weekly sell-off since August of last year. The S&P 500 with a mild bounce back, up 0.5% on the S&P, positive 16 points on the S&P 500. In the bond market, monster bid to close out last week. Yields approaching the lows of September last year at one point, in and around 150 to close out the week. Your lows of September, 143. Right now, 154, and yields up 4 basis points on a session, back through 2% on a 30-year yield, up 3 basis points on a session to 2.032%. In foreign exchange, to give you a feel of G10, this is what we look like. The euro negative by 1/3%. Sterling getting hammered as the Brexit debate continues to roll on. Yes, really, we are in phase 2, no longer phase 1. This is about negotiating the future relationship, and it looks like negotiations may well be a little bit difficult. Alongside Lisa Brabbits, then, I'm Jonathan Farrow, front and center in this market. Lisa, China reopening and down 7.88% at the close.
The amazing thing is that you're seeing that incredible plunge in China, and you're seeing resilience everywhere else. And the theory here is that China is going to be forced to add stimulus, and that this will support the global economy, right? I mean, it's not that there's any corner that's been turned with the coronavirus. In fact, you're seeing a continued acceleration of the virus, which really, to me, raises a question. Is this complacency? Is this sort of a buy the dip, knee-jerk reaction without necessarily thinking it through? I'm really struck by this dissonance between the numbers and what we're seeing in markets right
Mohammed Al-Arian writing in the Financial Times this morning the following. Let me quote some of it for you. Investors need to decide if they want to opt for more of the same by continuing to implement an investment playbook that has served them well, or if they want to treat the viral outbreak for what it is, a big economic shock that could derail global growth and shake markets out of their buy-the-dip mentality.
Yeah, well, and this morning we're getting Chinese officials coming out and saying that they may lower their 2020 growth expectations. Meanwhile, remember last year people were worried about trade tensions. You talk about phase 2. Where does this leave phase 2 negotiations if China feels like the U.S. is weaponizing the coronavirus by saying, hey, don't go over there, don't travel, don't have flights there, and essentially crippling in the short term the economy?
I find the criticism coming from the Chinese this morning to be quite bizarre.
the United States has indicated that they've offered to help, and this is what the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said today. The US government hasn't provided any substantial assistance to us, but it was the first to evacuate personnel from its consulate in Wuhan, the first to suggest partial withdrawal of its embassy staff, and the first to impose a travel ban on Chinese travellers. I've been surprised by this reaction from the Chinese overnight, especially at a time when the Chinese themselves have quarantined cities of 9, 10, 11 million people.
Well, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, I think, really rankled some feelings over in Beijing. He basically said the virus could hurt China's economy and potentially push jobs back to the U.S. And he had some words that really, I think, got nerves rattled.
Several other officials in the U.S. administration have quite rightly distanced themselves from that comment. But I think you're right to pick up on the demand shock that we could see to the global economy. The size of the sell-off in Chinese equity markets is no doubt going to get all the headlines, but that's not a leading indicator. Let's be clear. The markets that were open, that were linked to China through much of last week, were down 7% as the markets on the mainland were shut. And guess what? China plays catch up. For me, some of our reporting from our commodities team back in London, here's a headline for you. Oil demand has dropped by 20%.
Yeah.
That, Lisa, the biggest demand shock since the global financial crisis, but with a big, big difference. There is the belief it will bounce back just as quickly, and I just wonder how many people have that conviction, that confidence that will be the case.
Right, I saw the story. Chinese oil demand, as you said, dropping by about 3 billion barrels a day, 20% of total consumption, the largest demand shock the oil market has suffered since the global financial crisis of 2008. Why are we seeing oil prices getting a bit of a bid today? Why are they having a lift? Why are they slightly up?
Because everything was down so bad last week,
but is that really pricing it in? I mean, last week was not a bloodbath.
Well,
last week was a sell-off, but it was not.
Let's be clear.
Not just absolutely
people don't
ripping.
know what to price in. They
Correct.
don't know how long this will go on for. They don't know how much worse it will get. So let's ask the economists what to do. John Riding, Bring Capital Chief Economic Advisor, joining us around the table here in New York. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Jonathan.
What do you tell clients?
Well, look, one has to try and, I think, recognize, first of all, the coronavirus it's like all illnesses. It's terrible. It's spreading rapidly. But one has to put it in perspective. So what is it analytically? And I've argued that it's more a supply shock than it is a demand shock, at least for the rest of the world. We have integrated global supply chains. We had a shock to the supply chain last year from tariffs and the trade wars. We got that behind us, and now we have a supply chain shock coming out of the factories staying closed, which is a Chinese decision in terms of limiting the spread. Then, of course, there's the travel ban and so on. But if we go back to looking at SARS, it will no doubt be got under control. The timeline in the case of SARS from the WHO declaring it an international emergency, I think was that March 13th, 2003, to being sounding the all clear was in July of 2003. We don't know if it's got the same timeline. It spreads more rapidly because we've now had double the cases than there were total number of SARS cases. It doesn't appear to be as deadly.
But that said, a lot of people have pushed back on using SARS as an example of what to expect here, saying the Chinese economy is much more pivotal in the world.
Right.
You also have the backdrop of all of these tensions, and I think it's interesting that John, and really salient that John started on the blowback that the U.S. is getting from China on the response. How much is this going to potentially rise to a political issue and cause tensions on the trade front at a time when we had, had some sort of resolution?
Well, look, we had the phase one deal. The phase one deal signed. Now we move on to phase two, and the coronavirus has created some uncomfortable mood music for those negotiations, especially when the side of the administration that has been more anti-China, more pro-tariff, makes comments that you were referring to earlier being made. But that being said, calm heads prevailed in the trade talks, and I think that will happen here. There will be an impact on growth in the first quarter. As I said, in the U.S., I think we'll primarily see it in the supply chain, not in the consequences of reduced demand for China. That will have an impact, but the U.S. is still a relatively closed economy, and you work through the demand numbers, and they're pretty small for the U.S. The disruption to supply may be more significant, but without having a crystal ball and looking at SARS and think about this, that it's probably going to be, hopefully going to be, a first quarter event, and then the economy does
John, I
bounce
think
back.
many people share that hope. The difficulty they might be having at this point is that we spent much of last year with this tug of war between the consumer, this resilient services sector, and this really, really soft manufacturing sector. Not just a story for the United States, but a story for much of the developed world, including China as well. And we never quite resolved the question. There were hopes that we'd come into this year and the manufacturing would start to pick up and to stabilise, but it was never quite resolved. And that an issue like this, a shock like this, can derail things again. What do you say about that particular dilemma, John?
I think the key thing is to watch jobs, because what keeps the consumer in the game is employment. And employment growth has remained robust. The signals for January is that has continued in the first quarter. Very strong readings on the labor market out of the Consumer Confidence Report. The initial jobless claims data remain extremely low. So I say we have to watch jobs, and that's the key thing here. And
how important is the payrolls report this Friday, John? How important is payrolls this Friday? Given that a lot of this, though, predates. A lot of this particular survey will just predate any of the stress that we see in the global economy right now.
But economic momentum is very important, and you know when you're looking at the impact of something like SARS, it's like what is the momentum in the economy that's been impacted, and the jobs momentum has been strong. And if it remains strong, then the U.S. will power through this. And that's key. And I think there are some signs. We'll see. You know, we had a very weak Chicago PMI reading last week on manufacturing. That may have been distorted by Boeing, given that Boeing's headquartered in Chicago. We had a very strong reading out of the Richmond Fed manufacturing indicator, which we found to be statistically a fairly useful indicator of manufacturing. And we will get to know this morning with the ISM reading later on what the January manufacturing numbers look like. You're absolutely right. The difference between an economy that doesn't have manufacturing is a 2% growing economy, and we saw that last year, and one where capital spending comes back, and manufacturing kicks in, and then that becomes 2.5%, maybe better economic growth. But the construction numbers, the residential numbers look good. I think that's going to continue to drive the economy, and I think everything comes down to employment growth here for a while.
Hey, John, great to catch up with you. To get your thoughts, as always. John Riding, Bring Capital Chief Economic Advisor. Let's get you some headlines worldwide, shall we, from New York City. Let's say good morning to Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Lisa. The Senate will hold final arguments in President Trump's impeachment trial today. Wednesday's vote to acquit Trump will likely be among party lines. Republican Senator Lamar Alexander said he believes President Trump acted inappropriately and crossed a line in the Ukraine scandal, but said the president's actions did not rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. On CBS's Face the Nation, lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff said what the president did was much more than just inappropriate.
To call solicitation, coercion, blackmail of a foreign power, an ally at war by withholding military aid to get help in cheating the next election merely inappropriate doesn't begin to do justice to the gravity of this president's misconduct.
Face the Nation can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Democrats are making their final campaign pushes before the Iowa caucus tonight. It comes as a new Emerson poll shows Bernie Sanders leading with 28%, Joe Biden is second. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Uzbekistan today on the last leg of his trip to Eastern Europe and Central Asia. During a joint news conference, was asked about evacuating additional Americans from China because of the coronavirus. Pompeo says that is in the works and that the planes involved may carry medical supplies.
We hope also to bring some medical supplies in the context of those aircraft traveling into the region. We're working closely and hand in hand with the Chinese government to try and resolve what is now this global epidemiological challenge.
And President Trump congratulated the Kansas City Chiefs on winning Super Bowl 54. In a tweet, he called them true champions. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa.
True champions from Missouri. Let's just be, there's been so much of an uproar about that deleted tweet.
Yeah, you know what?
Can we just move on and focus about a game?
I agree. I agree.
What a performance.
It was great.
Didn't we say it on this program on Friday? But Mahomes would get it done and the Chiefs would do it.
I have to say, you did.
Youngest
I called it and I've got no idea.
Youngest player ever to get an MVP.
Called it and I've got no idea what I'm talking about. From New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Influential
For centuries, Welsh farmers have been perfecting the balance between maintaining the spectacular landscapes of Wales while producing delicious lamb and beef. Lucky for us, we have everything we need from the elements: grass, rainwater, and a whole lot of pride. Sustainability is key as we continue to work in harmony with our surroundings to bring you a plate that's uniquely Welsh. It's in the taste. Learn more at eatwelshlamandwelshbeef.com.
As a small business owner, I need to know that when I'm out on business, I'm not closed for business. I no longer need an office, just a little peace and quiet at the boardroom table, which is also the coffee shop table.
At O2, we get small businesses. That's why you can work from anywhere on the best business network. Search O2 Business or visit an O2 shop.
2019 Mobile Industry Awards terms apply. See o2.co.uk/terms.
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there, well, you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 7:17 on Wall Street. Now, Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. Let's get a check of the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Karen. China stepped in to limit damage as the country's stocks plunged after the holiday.
The PBOC cut rates and injected cash as the CSI 300 fell more than 7%. The coronavirus death toll has climbed past 360, while confirmed cases exceed 17,000. The US reported more infections and began limiting entry of travellers from China. Oil probably hasn't hit bottom yet. That's according to Citigroup, which is slashing its first quarter price estimate by 22%. And today's Iowa caucuses may come down to Democratic voters' last-minute decisions and second choices. An Emerson College survey shows Bernie Sanders in the lead and Joe Biden coming in second. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Karen.
All right, Hannah, thank you. S&P futures up 13 points. Dow futures up 99. NASDAQ futures up 40. The DAX in Germany's up 0.1%. 10-year Treasury down 10/30 seconds. Yield 1.54%. Yield on the 2-year 1.34%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. John and Lisa.
Hey, Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. We bounced back just a little bit, a mild rebound, as Karen points out. The S&P 500 up by 0.4%, positive 13 points. Not exactly a massive bounce, considering the rout that we closed out last week with. Let's get you to 5 things you need to know this morning, then beginning with the rout in Chinese markets, Lisa. Reopening after being closed for a week and playing catch down with various parts of this global market.
Yeah, biggest sell-off since 2015, with all but, I believe, 6 stocks in the index absolutely plummeting to their break points. And I'm just wondering why you have the rest of the markets around the world not reacting more. I mean, this is just notable to me that you're seeing a lift in U.S. equities.
I guess because China's not leading, China's playing catch-up. And at this point, we didn't have any material moves over the weekend. I don't think there's many people that look at this bounce with any confidence.
No.
On the S&P 500. I don't think anyone looked at this move of 0.4% and says, the coast is clear, let's buy back into risk. I think there are some serious doubts about the health of the global economy, given what is happening in China right now.
But I'm struggling to understand what it is that people are looking at, because a lot of investment managers came on this show and other shows and said what we're looking for is some sort of slowdown, some sort of bottoming out in the coronavirus and the spread of it before we go in and buy and have conviction. We are not seeing that. We're not seeing anything close to that. We're hearing that there is the development of a vaccine, and that could potentially be positive. We're hearing that China may add stimulus to their economy to support that front, so that could be giving a lift to U.S. markets. But on the coronavirus front, not seeing a whole lot of confidence that we're reaching any sort of bottom in the
Let's try and focus on the economics. I think many economists will come on this program and talk about a sharp V-shaped recovery, a hit to growth, and then we quickly recover and we bounce back as confidence builds as the year grows older. I just want to go back to a question that we discussed with John Riding just moments ago. This idea of this tug of war between the resilient service sector and a fragile manufacturing sector, that question just dominated much of 2019. And we come into 2020 not fully resolving the issue, but certainly the consensus view quickly becoming that things will get better. Manufacturing will either stabilize or pick up, and services will be okay. I just wonder to what degree we've reopened that question in a big way over the last couple of weeks.
Well, if you look at the dry bulk index and you take a look at how much the cost to ship the mainstay of the industrial complex, it is plummeted, right? You're seeing an absolute fall off there in terms of the cost of shipping, just because demand and supply just falling off a cliff. This is not going to necessarily bode well for the industrial sector, and we're not seeing it in any of the manufacturing data coming out. Without that rebound and with a slowing consumer, what's going to drive it forward?
So you mentioned the manufacturing data that's coming out. John Riding of Bring Capital also discussed this. He talked about momentum coming into this difficult period for the global economy and for China and for global health services as well. If you look at the German PMI, closing out January with 45.3. Now, this is better than much of what we saw last year, but the problem for parts of Europe is that there is very little economic momentum compared to, say, the United States, which is in and around trend growth. Europe's trend growth is 1%. That is incredibly close to what many people would describe as stall speed. And a manufacturing print of 45.3 isn't exactly encouraging when you are going into a difficult period in the global economy. That is the number going into the difficult period. That's a tough read for Europe right now.
Although a lot of people say that there have been cycles and that the industrial complex has been sort of in a bear market of its own. And there's a question of whether Danielle DiMartino Booth has actually said this coming out of the industrial kind of bottoming out that she sees. You know, are we going to see necessarily a resurgence in industry when we see a slowdown in the other sectors. It could be a different dynamic this time around. In the meantime, the oil price that's been falling dramatically has been really interesting to me, especially in light of the statistic you cited earlier about oil demand in China falling off a cliff. And I'm wondering, again, where is the bottom here, right? What's the willingness of Saudi Arabia and OPEC Plus to cut production further? What's the willingness or ability for the U.S. to sort of stop some of the supply? It's hard to really understand what's going to prop up prices in the near term.
Got to grapple with the demand shock, got to grapple with the shock to supply chains as well. There's just so much to get your head around, and the prospect that OPEC comes through, led by the Saudis, and starts talking about cuts again. Then we've got to turn our attention to the vote in Iowa, with Senator Sanders leading the polls going into the big one later this evening, Lisa.
Yeah, although I did some research this morning on how predictive the Iowa caucus has been. It's okay. It's actually more predictive when it comes to Democratic presidential candidates than Republican presidential candidates. The caucuses began in 1972. There have been 18 caucus winners between two parties, 10 Democrats and 8 Republicans, and more than half of those winners went on to secure their party's nomination in that cycle. But it's a coin toss, right? So, it is important to sort of understand the dynamic within the Democratic voter base, but not necessarily sort of a tell.
What's going to weigh on markets? The prospect of a progressive candidate taking on the President of the United States. This is from Terry Haynes of Pangaea this morning. Market fears about a progressive nominee will sustain at least for a few weeks thanks to the February primary schedule. Iowa will be quickly followed by the following week's New Hampshire primary, where Sanders is leading. Less progressive-friendly primaries will not happen for weeks. This is something else that the market's just got to digest in the coming month, Lisa.
Yeah, but I'm struggling to understand who's more electable, Senator Warren or Bernie Sanders. And so, I think that you have to look at that too, because a lot of people are looking at the economy and just saying President Trump is going to win. So it's not really going to matter. And the more progressive the candidate, the less of a chance they have to win against him. So that seems to be what the polls are saying, which might mute the market response and fallout.
Fifth and final thing, where does it all leave the Federal Reserve?
Well, the market's saying cut rates. Basically that's the implication from the inverted 3-month 10-year yield curve. Honestly, they're saying that rates are still on the margin too high and you should lower rates. But the political implication for them to cut rates going into the 2020 election is so fraught that it's hard for me to believe that they're going to do that. That said, there is a feeling, and have you heard this too from a lot of people, that the Fed's either going to not cut at all or cut by 50 basis points by year end?
I haven't heard that. I don't know how much we should read into the inverted yield curve, given the appetite for tens and the long end of the US Treasury curve from abroad. But I did think it was interesting to see the massive bid at the front end and a bull steepening we closed out the week with. That's the market that's starting to think about the Fed actually cutting rates, with twos down to 1.343%. That is your 5 things you need to know today. Brought to you by Lisa Abramowitz
and Jonathan Farrow.
Here we go. Equity futures positive by 0.4% on the S&P 500, up by 13 points from New York this morning. Good morning for our audience worldwide. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs, simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This Six Nations don't do things by halves. Turn to The Telegraph for unrivaled insight from legends of the game. Join Sir Ian McGeechan, Brian Moore, Will Greenwood and other rugby greats to follow every dramatic moment. Subscribe to our sport package today from just £1 per week at telegraph.co.uk.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
I am a force for good.
I am a force for courage.
And for calm.
I am a force for safety.
For fairness. For leadership.
I am a force for the future.
For compassion.
For my community. I am a police officer.
And I am a force for all.
Be one of the 20,000 new police officers and be a force for all that you believe in. Search Join the Police.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Here's your price action this Monday morning. Equities firmer on the S&P 500 up by 0.45%, positive by 14 points. The rout in China, maybe where some of the headlines are. The CSI 300 down by 7.88% after being closed for around about a week. China reopening to the biggest rout since 2015. For the broader market in treasuries, a bit of a lift on treasury yields. Yields last week down and down aggressively. This morning up by 3 basis points to 154 on 10s. On 2s up 3 basis points to 1.345%. In foreign exchange, to give you a feel of G10 sterling underperforming, it looks like the negotiations between the EU and the UK about the future trade relationship may well be tense to begin with. Sterling down by a little more than 1 full percentage point against the dollar. The euro weaker by 0.25%. And in the commodity market, down day after day after day after day. Copper bouncing back by 0.5% on the London Metal Exchange. Brent still lower by 1/3% to $56.44, as some of our reporting here at Bloomberg suggests that oil demand has dropped by 20% in China over the last couple of weeks. Absolutely remarkable. Talking of the data, look out for the data in the United States a little bit later this morning, at 9:45 Eastern, a manufacturing PMI, and Lisa at 10 a.m. I imagine it will get a lot of attention. The ISM manufacturing number coming out a little bit later.
It is backward looking, but still perhaps a little bit affected at this point by the coronavirus. People are going to be looking really closely at that. In the meantime, I want to pick up on what you said about the oil demand and how much it's fallen off a cliff in China. And I'm looking right now. Remember when we talked a lot about the UN crossing that $7 per dollar mark? Well, it crossed it. and people aren't really talking about it. And you're seeing the MSCI Emerging Market Currency Index having its biggest one-day drop at one point today since August of last year. I'm wondering at what point this is going to become a concern. This has been ongoing weakness. It continues despite the fact that we're seeing resilience in U.S. equities.
I think it's because we digested a lot of it last week, given the moves in the offshore yuan, and I think the onshore yuan reopening, that many people just aren't that surprised given what we saw last week in the FX market. Though I take your point, if it continues, it's certainly going to be of concern.
Yeah, and at this point, again, I wonder how much politically this weighs into the negotiations for phase 2, and at what point people start talking about this, because at one point, crossing the 7 yuan per dollar was a threshold for President Trump to come out and say currency manipulation. Now you have, the additional pressure of China hitting back at the U.S. and saying you're being overly sensational and you're furthering putting a crimp on our economy by prohibiting flights and putting out these warnings saying that people shouldn't travel there. I just find this really compelling. At what point will that reignite some of the trade concerns that dominated throughout 2019?
The tension's there. Let's turn this to politics, shall we? Kevin Cirilli, Bloomberg Chief Washington correspondent, not in Washington, D.C. He's in Iowa ahead of the vote a little bit later. Kevin, fantastic to catch up with you. Just set the scene for us all.
Well, just in a couple of hours, caucus goers here in Iowa will really be able to make their voices heard. Now, the expectations are that this is really becoming a race between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. The Emerson poll yesterday released of likely Iowa caucus goers in the Democratic Party puts Bernie Sanders at the forefront. But what does that mean? What it means is that heading into New Hampshire, heading into the next stage of primaries and caucuses, Bernie Sanders now would emerge as a front runner. And who is that next viable alternative? Is it Joe Biden? Is it Pete Buttigieg? Is it an other candidate? That's what we just don't know. Should Biden be able to pull off an upset tonight and win against Bernie Sanders, that would be a massive political victory for him heading into New Hampshire. But and the flip side of that, should he finish in the third or fourth spot, it would raise questions about the long-term viability of his campaign.
Kevin, I've got one more name to put after Is it John Kerry? What on earth was that about this weekend?
I was at the Biden rally yesterday here in Des Moines at a local gymnasium in a school, and John Kerry was there. There were lawmakers that were there. I mean, it really felt as if that the Democratic establishment was very much behind Joe Biden. But I want to contrast that with the momentum and the grassroots movement, which really seems to be rallying behind Bernie. And I would also just note that if you have a situation where a Buttigieg or a Warren were to finish stronger than anticipated, that could also inject some new lifeline into their campaign. Iowa matters for 3 quick reasons. One is free earned media. The second is momentum. And the third is donors. And a lot of these other candidates might not be able to continue onward if they can't pick up the phone after tonight and say, hey, I still got a fighting chance in this thing.
Well, clearly we're playing into the free media coverage. I am wondering here, if you look at Predicted, which is a market that people weigh in on and bet who's going to be the front runner in today's caucus, Bernie Sanders has a 69-cent price on him for yes, and so he's in the lead with Joe Biden right behind 23 cents. I'm just wondering what this whole thing about a key poll that was not released because Buttigieg's campaign complained, and so that his name was not included in all the calls.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was the talk of the town. I mean, everyone couldn't stop talking about it. So the Des Moines Register always traditionally puts out a final poll ahead of the Iowa caucus. What happened was, and this is like legendary here in the Hawkeye State, and what happened was Buttigieg was not named on all of the polling for that, and so his campaign was incredibly worried. The reason that poll matters so much is because it's a foreshadowing of who has momentum, and it truthfully does impact the local media coverage here in Iowa. So because of that, this legendary poll wasn't released, and I got to be candid, just anecdotally, coffee shops, Uber drivers, everyone was buzzing about how this poll wasn't released. And it would kind of be like a tailgate being canceled at an Eagles game.
Well, but this raises a question about the accuracy of some of these polls, because people are putting money both directly on this and with respect to the market based on what we're seeing and who the front runner is.
I don't know why.
Well, but that's my point. I mean, how accurate are these polls?
They weren't accurate last cycle. And so I think you raise an incredibly great point, because there's so many. I was talking with a pollster last week, literally just about this very topic, which is how do you poll people who one generation doesn't have landline phones, then other folks, are blocking calls. No one likes getting those courtesy calls. They're not courteous at all, and so it's very difficult to poll. And so they're always going to the people who are likely to vote, and those people who are likely to vote typically lean establishment voters. And to be honest, the process just within the last 4 to 6 years has been totally upended. Not even that. I mean, ever since the Tea Party movement has been totally upended with new types of voters, and that's why polls are really at a point of confusion here in American politics.
Kevin, take me inside the party. There is this narrative that has been building that the party and the people that lead the party do not want Bernie Sanders to get the nomination.
They don't.
They'll start to work against him. Just bring some life to that narrative. How very real is that?
I'm having flashbacks to the last cycle when the Republican establishment, the old guard Republican establishment, didn't want Trump. And it's very similar to the dynamic that has emerged with Bernie Sanders. Now, the question, or what I would suggest and put forward is that should Bernie Sanders win Iowa? We don't know. Should he have a strong showing in New Hampshire and elsewhere? Winning yields more winning, and it becomes increasingly difficult to stop a train that is picking up momentum. And so this idea that there would somehow be a delegate fight, for as complex as the process is, and this is what there are differences between Republicans and Democrats, but for as complex as the process is, Jonathan, for average folks watching this all around the world, and more importantly here in America, winning means you won. And so it's difficult. It doesn't mean you won a fraction of delegates. It means you won. And so that's where it gets a little bit more difficult to stop someone who keeps winning.
Kevin, let's just get out 9 months, shall we, if we can, and get out the crystal ball a little bit. There is a view, on Wall Street at least, that if a progressive candidate does take on the President of the United States, the ultimate hedge, because the ultimate fear, of course, is that the corporate tax cut gets unwound, the ultimate hedge is that the Republican Party will keep the Senate. And many of these big policies, many of these progressive policies won't get through, and therefore it's okay, the tax cut won't get unwound. Talk to me about that ultimate hedge. Is that still the high probability outcome, Kevin?
Yes, and beyond that, I mean, you and I know this. We've talked about this offline. Divided government, good for markets. And so that provides certainty. It provides it makes it more difficult for sweeping policy changes to get done. Divided government, good for markets. And so I think beyond that, I would also just say that should you have a Sanders nomination and whatnot, he would have to coalesce the party. He would have to bring on some other more moderating voices. Beyond that, it also means volatility for trade policy. You would have you would have the incumbent and you would have the nominee who are very much negotiating on trade policies in a different way rather than American policy has in the last decade.
Hey, Kevin, always great to catch up with you. Enjoy your morning. I know we're going to touch base with you in around about an hour. The Iowa vote starting in a couple of hours' time. Let's turn to the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report, shall we? It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, a top 100 national university in the latest U.S. News and World Report college rankings. Learn more at news.njit.edu. Let's cross over to Nathan Hager. Hey, Nathan.
Jonathan, Lisa, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Drug makers are looking at ways to combat the coronavirus in Thailand. Health officials say a cocktail of HIV medications when taken with Tamiflu may have helped one seriously ill patient there get better. Those HIV drugs are sold by AbbVie as Coletra. They're already being studied in the Chinese city where the coronavirus outbreak began, Wuhan. Climate models that have been used for decades to predict the effects of climate change are running even hotter. Last year, scientists ran the same assumptions on greenhouse gas emissions that in the past had predicted a 3 degrees Celsius rise in global temperatures. Some of those models came back 5 degrees hotter. It's unclear why, and it could take months to determine whether to trust these new higher numbers. And this may sound counterintuitive, but astronomers at the University of Warsaw in Poland say they've discovered invisible stars. Their light is so dim, you can't see these stars even with a telescope. So how do they know they're there? Well, using data from the Gaia Space Observatory back in 2016, astronomers noticed a distant star that was getting brighter and dimmer over and over again. They determined that it wasn't what this star itself was doing. It was the gravity of another star that they couldn't see, warping space-time and magnifying the light of the star they could see. And using that data, they were able to calculate the invisible star's mass, distance, and orbit. That is today's Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. John and Lisa.
Thank you so much, Nathan. We have a star here. He's not invisible. Michael Barr with the news.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, John. The last few days of President Trump's Senate impeachment trial will start later this morning. U.S. Senate members will almost certainly vote along party lines on Wednesday with his acquittal. The senators will hear closing arguments between Trump's legal team and prosecutors from the Democratic-controlled House, which charged him with abusing power by pressuring Ukraine to probe political rival Joe Biden. Democrats made a final push ahead of tonight's Iowa caucus. Bernie Sanders at a Super Bowl watch party in Des Moines was asked about climate change.
What that agenda says is that unlike Donald Trump, we know that climate change is not a hoax. It is an incredibly dangerous reality for our country and the world.
Sanders leads an Emerson poll of likely Democratic caucus goers with 28%. A husband and wife identified as the latest coronavirus patients are in California. Dr. Marty Fensterscheib with San Bernardino County Health Department says the man recently returned from China, the epicenter of the outbreak.
The good thing is that they were informed of the potential risk. They stayed at home. They did not go out even for groceries. They have not been out of their house.
Dr. Marty Fensterscheib of the San Benito County Health Department. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts from more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. Here is your Monday morning of price action. Equity futures are positive 16 points on the S&P 500, up by 0.48%. Equities higher, bonds lower, Treasury yields heading north, up by 3 basis points on a 10-year to 1.54%, on a 2-year yield 1.34%. And in the foreign exchange market, in G10, the euro negative 0.33%. In commodities, crude, WTI, up around about 0.1%, $51.61. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Tokyo Olympic organizers are trying to shoot down rumors that this year's 2020 games might be canceled or postponed because of the spread of a new virus. Japan has so far reported no deaths from the coronavirus that has killed hundreds of people in China. The Olympics open on July 24th. A footnote about the site of Super Bowl 54, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. They ditched all of its disposable plastic cups for Sunday's game for 50,000 cups made from aluminum, which is easier to recycle. However, aluminum cups are more expensive than its plastic counterparts. Stadium concessionaire Centerplate, Bud Light, and Ball were involved. Centerplate and the Miami Dolphins have invested $500,000 in their push to rid Hard Rock Stadium of single-use plastic. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Grainger, America's trusted source for industrial and safety supplies. Visit Grainger.com.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Global news. Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sail.
That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Confucius once said, "Life is simple, but we insist on making it complicated." We're no philosophers, but at SEAT, we believe choosing your next car should be simple too. So we're offering the Ibiza FR with Beats Audio sound system, 17-inch alloy wheels, and your choice of metallic paint for £199 a month with £840 initial rental. Why make life more complicated? Find your local retailer at seat.co.uk.
Price based on FR 1 litre MPI with Beats Audio sound system, 48-month contract hire, 5,000 miles per annum, 18s and over, orders until March 31st, 2020, subject to status, not in conjunction with any other offers. Damage charges may apply, no ownership, SEAT Financial Services.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are rising. European shares are drifting a bit following steep losses at the end of last week as investors monitor the international response to the coronavirus outbreak. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 15 points. Dow futures up 118. NASDAQ futures up 49. The DAX in Germany's up about 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 10/30 seconds, yield 1.54%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.34%. NYMEX crude oil little changed, up 2 cents at 51.58 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.25% or $4.20 at 15.8370 an ounce. The euro 1.1064 against the dollar. The yen is at 108.52. Watching shares of Gilead Sciences this morning up 4.9%. A new antiviral drug from Gilead is being tested to treat the coronavirus. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. John and Lisa.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. As Karen points out, we bounced back after a week of losses on the S&P 500, down last week by 2.12% over the week after a really big drop on Friday. We bounced back just a little bit with equity futures up 16, positive 0.5%. The focus of global markets and the world on the coronavirus coming out of China. Joining us now, I'm really pleased to say, is Dr. Amish Adalja, Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Senior Scholar. Doctor, fantastic to have you with us on the program to get your brilliant insight. Let's just begin with a rather simple question that deserves, I'm sure, a complex answer. What makes this coronavirus just so difficult to contain?
What makes it so difficult to contain is that it is spreading between humans efficiently. That means a person can get infected and pass it on to somebody else and then maybe pass it on to somebody else. So it's spreading in the community, and that makes it very hard. And it's also spread through the respiratory route, coughs and sneezes, which are much harder to really contain than something that's spread in a different manner. So there's a lot of characteristics that are kind of pushing that case count higher.
Doctor, the last few weeks, a lot of people have been trying to understand the so-called incubation period, the length of it, and whether you're contagious during it. Do we know anything more about that now?
We have seen some data coming from Germany that is really suggestive of transmission during the incubation period, when someone who wasn't sick at all passed it on to somebody, and then they got ill. This is something we hadn't seen with coronaviruses, and it is something that makes control very hard, because if you don't know who is contagious, you can't isolate them, you can't do any type of social distancing to keep them away from other people. It usually doesn't cause the force of the epidemic. It's not going to spread. It's not going to be a big force in the spread of it, but it becomes very hard to completely eliminate the infection if you have these asymptomatic people who are able to spread during their incubation period.
What's the fatality rate been like? I've heard a lot of arguments saying that the common flu is incredibly fatal and has had a much broader impact, yet it hasn't necessarily created the same sort of hysteria.
So the fatality rate that we're often quoting now is 2%, but that's a very skewed number, because that number is derived from the cases that are being diagnosed in China, which are going to be selected from the more sick group of people. They're not testing people that are out in the community who have maybe more like common cold-like symptoms, which coronaviruses can cause, versus testing people that are in the hospital with pneumonia and need to be hospitalized. So you're getting what's called a severity bias. So that 2% we expect to come down as more and more people who have mild symptoms are tested. And as you've seen, the rate has been coming down as we get the case counts higher. And there's only been one death outside of China So that really argues that this is going to be less severe in terms of fatality, much less severe than SARS, for example.
Dr. Adalja, do you think that the reaction that we've seen in terms of stopping flights and just in general recommending people don't go to China has been an overreaction based on what you just said?
It's one thing to have travel advisories for individuals that are going to China so that they are aware of what the risks may be and what protective actions to take, but it's quite another to basically enact a travel ban against China and people coming from China. That, I think, is not warranted, and we've learned that from many outbreaks that those travel bans do not work. They divert precious public health resources to enforcing a travel ban and really looking at travelers versus actually ramping up our health system to be able to deal with these cases when they do occur in the United States. And it ends up making things worse in China because it creates economic damage, it creates stigmatization, it makes it logistically harder to get resources into that area. And it will not really have a measurable impact on a respiratory disease that's spreading this well in the community in almost 24 countries. I think that we have to prepare for the eventuality that this will come to the United States, and we will have an outbreak of it here. And it may not be very severe, but it can be very disruptive to our health system, which runs basically at capacity every day.
Doctor, this is a take that I think a lot of people outside of the medical world struggle with. They look at the quarantine measures within China, massive cities effectively being shut down, and ask themselves, well, okay, if they've got quarantine measures, why wouldn't we shut down our borders to the epicenter of where this disease, where this virus has come from? And Doctor, just from someone from outside the medical world, that's kind of the response to what you've just said. What do you say back to that?
Well, first of all, I would say that China's quarantining of 50 million people was also unwarranted. That made conditions much worse in Wuhan, with shortages of food, medical bed shortages, physician shortages. Had people fled that area, lots of mistrust of public health authorities. So what China did was also wrong as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that this had probably been spreading for some time in China before it was noticed. At least in November, it was spreading. And there were many, many travelers leaving Wuhan. And remember that the spectrum of illness that coronavirus causes includes things like the common cold, very mild type of symptoms in many patients. I suspect that there are more cases in the world that have not been diagnosed because they recovered or they were very mild or mixed in with flu and not diagnosed because they're very poor at diagnosing viral infections. So it's likely that this has already spread and is not completely containable. And what we want to do now, while we have time, is actually prepare our hospitals, make sure our supply chains are good, make sure that diagnostic testing is scaled up, because this is really going to come here inevitably.
Yeah.
And we want to blunt the impact of it. And if you spend a lot of time focusing on travelers and quarantines and travel bans, you're really diverting precious resources. And in the end, it's not going to make much of a difference because this is a respiratory virus that has some spread during its asymptomatic period. So it becomes very hard to contain. And travel bans did not work during H1N1. They did not work during Ebola. They did not work during HIV. They do not work. And they actually make things much harder, even though politicians love to run for them when any time of outbreak occurs.
Doctor, appreciate your point of view this morning. That's Dr. Amish Adalja joining us from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, a senior scholar there. We should, of course, point out that Michael R. Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. A perspective there, Lisa, from the world of medicine.
The question that I have is, how much do we really know about the coronavirus at this point? Because we've also just speaking with medical experts saying, one aspect of this is that we don't understand it completely. We don't necessarily know the path of it. They have done a genetic tracking of the virus, and they are getting a better understanding and possibly a vaccine. But the sort of unknowns and the unknowability is sort of what's spurring a lot of the fear and probably some of the quarantines that Dr. Adalja is saying perhaps were unwarranted.
In the world of public health and the world of medicine, we know very little. Even the professionals themselves are admitting that. So from the perspective of someone in markets, in the world of economics, it's really, really difficult and complex to understand the fallout. Equity futures, they bounced back a little bit. We're up 15 on the S&P 500. This is Bloomberg.
If you say that you are mine, I'll be here till the end of time.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Where are we?
The New Forest.
But I thought we only had the Mini Countryman booked for a test drive. We can't stay here.
We're not going to.
This isn't exactly what I meant.
Relax. With Mini's new 48-hour test drive, you can use the Countryman for exactly what it's built for. Exploring. Plus, it's an SUV, the largest Mini in the range, so you can pack loads more in.
Great. Where next?
Well, you know how you've always wanted to try kayaking?
The Mini Countryman 48-hour test drive. Visit mini.co.uk to book yours. Mini. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City! Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification.
It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Abramowitz, John Farrow, and Tom Keene. Thrilled you're with us. Sorry I was late, John.
Were you up late last night?
Massive battle last night. Afterthought. We stayed up 2 hours extra. I lost my beauty sleep arguing over who had the bigger impact, J-Lo or Shakira.
I was going to say it last hour. And I didn't want to.
I'm sorry. Folks, I overslept for the first time in 20 years.
Did you have a few drinks?
No.
No,
I didn't
that
actually.
No.
I didn't. The call, did you see, does this happen? The football, like he's putting the football over the line at the end of the game and doing the tiptoe away.
You got to talk into the microphone for radio.
Thank you. Anyways, I'll wind up in the Super Bowl.
It's good to have you back.
Last hour. Anyways, lots going on in the markets. We welcome all of you here today, and do so with China. John, to me, it's banded and contained. They were shut for X number of days, down 7%. As a general statement, not a big deal.
Playing catch down, and the markets that were open last week linked to China indicated that the move we would see would be in and around 7%, and that's exactly what we got, despite the measures implemented by the Chinese authorities. A mild bounce back in risk this morning, Tom. I emphasise mild. We're up 0.5% relative to the 2 percentage point loss of last week. And I still think people have very little confidence about how long this goes on for and the damage that will be done to the global economy.
And Lisa, yields contained. I mean, I thought, all in all, I expected an uglier morning.
Yeah, I did too, actually, to be completely honest. But you're seeing actually a bounce back in yields, a mild sell-off in treasuries. And I'm wondering here what people are looking at to sort of glean confidence that we've hit a bottom. I don't think there is a lot of confidence, John, to your point. That said, the economic bleed-through has the potential to be more of a shock, even if the coronavirus isn't as severe when you look at the actual death count.
We're going to set this up this morning. We can do it across any number of things, the institutional view. Right now, for a lot of people, just the gyrations of Tehran and Baghdad and all that we saw in oil, and now the gyrations of the Chinese virus out of Wuhan. Kathy Jones joins. She's with Charles Schwab, their chief fixed income strategist. Kathy, have you as a shop, has Schwab changed their 2020 view and belief with the news flow of January?
Well, what has changed in the fixed income world for us is we've lowered our upside target for 10-year Treasury yield. So we came into the year thinking we had a mild upturn in global economic indicators. We'd ease the trade tensions with China, the U.S. economy chugging along at a pretty decent rate, the Fed on hold, that there was some room for longer-term yields to trend a little bit higher and the curve to steepen. And now we have to lower the upper end of that we're probably roughly around 2% rather than the 2.25 to 2.5 where we were before. So far, that's all we've really changed.
Vice Chairman Clarida, in conversation with our David Weston, making very clear we're in the vicinity of 2% inflation. How in the vicinity are we?
Well, it depends on which inflation measure you look at. And this is a point I keep making, is they focus on the core PCE, which is running at 1.6%. But when you look at all the other indicators, CPI, core CPI, and then all of these inflation indicators that the Fed itself puts out, whether it's the Dallas Trimmed Mean or the Cleveland Sticky Price Index, you name it, they're all above 2%. It happened for quite some time. So I'm a little puzzled at the preoccupation with core PCE.
Let's talk about what happened at the front end of the curve on Friday, shall we? Much has been made about the flattening that we've seen. We saw some steepness come out of Friday, and that was led by yields on 2 years coming down aggressively. Are we starting to price in a Fed cut, Kathy?
Yeah, I think we're starting to price in 2 Fed cuts this year, which may be a little aggressive. But what I keep watching, or will be watching now, is financial conditions. So I think the Fed would very much like to stay on hold. They only have limited firepower, and they'd love to stay on hold for an extended period of time. But if financial conditions tighten, then that may force their hand. That forced their hand last year. It may force their hand again. So far, financial conditions are in pretty good shape. We're still on the easy side, but if that tightens, then that's something that they might respond to.
Kathy, let's talk about buy points in the fixed income world, shall we? Right now, high yield spreads are at around 390 basis points. Had a big move over the last couple of weeks, but at that level, it's hardly severe. We were 150 basis points wider than that back in December 2018 when the Fed really started to get concerned. Is there a buy point in your mind, Kathy, for high yield spreads?
Well, I'd much rather see something north of 400, maybe 420 to 450. That would get me interested. Right now, we've been cautious on high yield for a long time because the spread's so narrow, and just the risk reward wasn't attractive. If we could get, something north of 400 to 450-ish, we'd take a look at it.
Kathy, what are you looking at to get confidence that this is not going to be an economic shock and that this is the coronavirus that is continuing to spread throughout Asia?
Yeah, and that's the difficult part because China, as many people have pointed out, is so central now to the global economy. It is basically the world's factory floor. And because of the shutdown of activity, this can ripple through other economies pretty quickly and pretty severely. So it's really the length of time, I think, that it lasts rather than the severity of the downturn. A lot of people have the buy the dip mentality that, this is just a temporary blip that'll bounce back, and that may be true. But if it lasts a really long time, the global economy is not growing at such a healthy rate that this is not going to have an impact. You look at commodity prices, which have collapsed, that could ripple through a lot of different industries for a length of time.
Well, this is deflation and disinflation and new permanence of this low yields, the way they go out the x-axis. Great. Would you suggest then that for people who are financially repressed, that dividend growth is a yield proxy? I mean, John talks about the spread. Is a new spread, I'm going to buy a rising dividend.
Yeah, we don't. We think dividend-paying stocks are great.
See how she said that? It's like, she and Liz Ann Saunders aren't even on speaking terms.
Yeah, we don't.
We don't.
We don't. It's not a substitute for bonds. I mean, they're very different attributes, very different risk profiles, and you lose a lot of diversification if you seek all your yield in dividend-paying stocks. Again, we think they're great for the equity portion of the portfolio, but they're not a substitute for bonds.
Folks, what you just heard there was Common Sense 101. There's a lot of theory on this, like actually fancy theory. And the answer is when you hear someone say dividend is a yield equivalent, run.
Yeah, well, and that's frankly what a lot of people have been counting on. So it'll be interesting to see if that is an expensive proposition at this point going into a potential slowdown. Kathy, I'm wondering about emerging markets, in particular, looking at the MSCI Emerging Market Currency Index, which is just falling out of bed and continuing to plummet. And I'm wondering how much the sort of consensus trade heading into 2020 that emerging markets bonds, and particularly local currency bonds, would outperform everything else. How much has that been turned on its head by what we've seen so far this year?
Yeah, it's pretty much upside down now. And I think it was somewhat dubious to begin with, but it's certainly, with the coronavirus having such a major impact on commodities and countries that are in the emerging market index that are related to China through trade and even through financing, and then you have one-offs like South Africa and Turkey. I think it's a tough case to make in a good market. It's even tougher now, and yield's really not that high to justify the risk.
Kathy, thank you so much. Kathy Jones with Charles Schwab, their chief fixed income strategist. John, to me, this is enduring. And the hardest part I'm having is a calendar. And I'm still not used to saying 2020, even though we're already 1 month in. We are now 13 years, 12 years on in this crisis. And it was supposed to be like this financial slowdown, repression, whatever. And then we'd escape it. We're not escaping. I mean, if you own Apple, great, you escaped it. Other than that, no.
You're talking from a market's perspective?
From a yield retirement,
right.
like
well, that's got worse.
Annuity.
That's got worse. That's not got better.
What's that 4.1% annuity, that retirement life annuity thing you people do in England? 3.9% this year?
Really, really difficult to achieve. Tom, the returns at the moment, I mean, the security that I've picked on again and again, you take the 2025 note from, say, Tesla right now, the yield last week at one point was below 5%.
Yeah, it was above par.
Just think about that.
But here's the interesting thing to me. The fact that people do still feel insecure and still aren't feeling animal spirits is what's keeping this cycle going so long, because people aren't levering up that 5% Tesla bond in order to get 20% returns.
Maybe I'm missing, what you said the last hour, but John, what you said there's so important about the Fed rate cuts modeled in. Does that mean UK cuts by extrapolation and a negative interest rate in the United Kingdom?
I wouldn't look to the UK right now. I'd be looking to the ECB. Europe's in a tough spot. The lack of momentum that they've got coming into a real growth shock, Just not there at all. And an ECB right now with already deeply negative interest rates. I think the Europe finds itself in a really tough spot if this continues for much longer.
And Lisa, I did the German chart, the 2-year and the 10-year, and the 10-year German yield really rolled over with a vengeance last week, ever more negative.
Yeah.
Not record negative, but nevertheless there.
Yeah, and it's just, to me, it's a question of what more ammunition can they possibly have. I mean, more negative, does that work?
No idea. Going to have to ask the head of the ECB.
We'll try to do that.
You should do that. Do that yourself. Here in New York, I'm pleased to say Michael Barr joins us in the studio. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Lisa. The Iowa caucuses begin at 7 p.m. local time in Iowa. And the lead-up has been full of activity, with the Democratic candidates cramming as many campaign stops into their days as they can possibly manage. Senator Elizabeth Warren rallied supporters in Des Moines.
Our democracy hangs in the balance. And at this moment, you will decide here in Iowa, what do we do? Do we pull back? Do we cower?
Meanwhile, a new Emerson College poll of likely caucus goers has Bernie Sanders leading with 28%. Joe Biden is second with 21%. Pete Buttigieg is third with 15%. And Elizabeth Warren is fourth with 14%. Closing arguments are expected at the Senate impeachment trial today, a day before President Trump's State of the Union address. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Uzbekistan today on the last leg of his trip to Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Pompeo, during a joint news conference with Uzbekistan's foreign minister, was asked about the U.S. presence in Afghanistan and the peace process there.
We got close once before to having an agreement, a piece of paper that we mutually executed, and the Taliban were unable to demonstrate either their will or their capacity, or both, to deliver on a reduction in violence. And so what we are demanding now is demonstrable evidence of their will and capacity to reduce violence.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Chris, we're doing our Super Bowl wrap-up here. We could do that with Michael Barr, host of Bloomberg Business of J-Lo. What'd you think last night?
Business of J-Lo.
The game was good, but I want, to me, it was the best thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
I mean, the dancing at the end, I thought was like stunning.
There was a prop bet, and I'm not making this up, a prop bet that Shakira and J-Lo would shake their heinies.
Here we go.
During the show.
And why are you so interested in this? Wait, did you actually?
Won.
Oh, there you go.
But you won the bet.
I won the bet. It actually was a prop bet.
Can't go home, but you won the bet.
Can't go home.
You think this was better than Prince in 2007?
Close.
Come
fair.
on.
Fair.
Let's get real. Best ever.
I thought it was superb. I thought the dancing at the end, the choreography was just
You two are
shocking.
revealing a lot about yourselves on this program.
No, I went with Shakira. I mean, she opened up.
Jenny from the block.
I don't know. I can't go home if I don't go with Shakira.
Are you playing Jenny from the block right now?
Can I have your couch?
Can I just tell you, though, you know who stole the show? Bad Bunny stole the show with Shakira. Bad Bunny just killed it. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Stay grounded as the amounts roll in. I'm real, I thought I told you.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
India's second budget in 7 months left
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking, and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, 8:17 on Wall Street. Futures are higher. We go to the first word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. U.S. futures have added to their gains since the last time we spoke. Dow futures now up 163 points. S&P's gained 20, while NASDAQ futures rise by 63. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.55%. Gold is down 12 now. And Shanghai reopened, plunged 7.7% overnight. Note the PBOC cut rates and injected cash into the financial system. European markets are trading higher, led by gains in Italy and the UK. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 9:45. Market U.S. manufacturing PMI, and at 10 o'clock, construction spending and ISM manufacturing. Regarding earnings this morning, Checkpoint EPS beat estimates. And in other news, a Gilead drug will undergo human trials in China to treat the coronavirus. Shares are up 5.5% in the pre-market. And wrapping things up, Charter Communications was raised to outperform at Credit Suisse. Ulta Beauty raised to buy at Goldman Sachs. Nike was raised to buy at UBS, and Navistar to equal weight over at Wells Fargo. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate that. Again, futures, 20. John, Miranda Carr is like a few of the people we have. It's like authentic knowledge on China, not the distance thing. I feel like incredibly...
Live and breathes it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so distant. I've been to China. I've been literally, like in Hong Kong, I'm in like 3/4 of a mile.
You go to China and then you stay in the hotel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complete bogus statement to say I've been to China. It's just, that's not true.
Well, we can bring in Miranda Carr right now, High Tong Securities senior analyst. Miranda, talk to us about the damage being done to the economy at the moment.
Well, you've got basically two elements to it. I mean, the first is the consumption hit. So Spring Festival, the consumption, no one was going out, no one was spending, going out and seeing people. So you've had that sort of short-term economic hit. But the longer-term economic hit could be the one where we're seeing now, where instead of going back to work and production starting to kick off, where you want the Spring Festival, sort of post-Spring Festival bounce, where everyone's having a key eye on new export orders and production levels, that's not starting now. And so this is where sort of a lot of the sort of industrials and the private sector manufacturing may see a bigger hit than what we saw as a consumption hit over the Spring Festival shutdown.
Miranda, we had a guest on the program in the last hour that said he's much more worried about the supply chain hit than the demand side hit. Does that resonate with you?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, because with the demand side, you can get, if people didn't spend money over Spring Festival, they've still got it in their pockets, they can go out and so when the virus passes, that consumption rebound can happen. But the trouble is going to be in areas where, they were already under pressure for the trade war and the supply chain sort of, shifting around into other countries and other areas of the world. Now, if they're not getting their sort of export rebound, they're already suffering cash flow problems, and then you have a production shutdown, then that means you're going to have a lot of the sort of SME sector going to be struggling with both cash flows and orders as we come into Q2, and that will then depends how long the virus then hits. If it continues on to Q2, then that could be a real struggle.
Miranda, there's been some speculation that the PBOC, that Beijing will inject a significant amount of additional stimulus to offset any potential economic shock here. How much ammunition do they have to completely cushion the blow here?
Well, interestingly, so they've actually got, because they didn't go sort of full pelt in the stimulus on the trade war, they still have a little bit of ammunition left. I mean, if you think of infrastructure last year was only 4% year-on-year growth. So they can still bring forward a lot of the local government spending, local government bond issuance, and get that spending. But again, it does come down to when the virus starts peaking and construction because you can't put infrastructure in place if people aren't able to move around. So you really need the virus to start sort of peaking and then movement to start going again. And then once you get into Q2, Q3, then you're likely to see a much bigger stimulus package than you saw, particularly, monetary policy easing, but also more infrastructure investment plans.
Miranda, the constructive view on all of this is that we get some kind of V-shaped recovery. It's an inflection point that you have in mind that we go beyond. The longer this goes on for, the more you doubt that we will get that sharp V-shaped recovery out of the Chinese economy.
Well, the official projections at the moment are for it to peak in 17th of February. I mean, it's an incredibly precise date. If it peaks then and then starts declining, then basically we're going to see sort of Q2 rebound. The risk is obviously, even this time last week, saying was going to be over 17,000 in infected cases. No one was imagining that. So therefore, it's the uncertainty about when that peak is going to happen, which is a big problem, and all the associated shutdowns with trying to prevent that, rather than necessarily the scale of the infection itself.
Miranda, will this affect agricultural transfer from the United States to China, like to be direct soybeans from the United States to China? Does any of that get gummed up so far?
Well, I think that may have issues, but I think it points to an even more interesting one, because one of the things which is a big factor. I mean, one of the issues this year was going to be the pig price increases because of the swine fever. Yeah. That's basically a food safety issue. And then now you've got this, which is obviously coming from wild, supposedly coming from wild animals. And you've got this whole supply chain, food distribution, food safety, all of that different aspect. And suddenly China's going to have to take quite dramatic action in order to do that and make that investment. And to be honest, that's where some of the most interesting, if you're thinking about sort of where the upsides from this can come, then it's in that kind of, the cold chain distribution and the food safety and all the sort of, the food manufacturers who should actually then start benefiting from this, because that's where they're going to have to address a lot of the issues that have got us into this place in the first place.
Miranda, thank you so much. Miranda Carr with Haitong International this morning. Can we do a shout out to our Asia team?
Of course you can.
Under real duress, they're like at home, and you make a joke about it, folks, but it's, what I've learned in talking to family in China, it's just down to basic things like getting groceries.
Yeah, and not only that, but just the idea that everybody's trying to get masks, and if they can't get them, they're doing things like put bottles over their heads. It's just the fear that must be absolutely pervasive, and the lack of knowledge of exactly what this is.
Or if not fear, just particularly away from Wuhan, just tenseness, like just a real overarching, it's here, it's real, it's Monday, of course, into their Tuesday. as well. We've had some great guests on this as well. Major shout out to Peter Hotez, who joined us from Baylor under a real tight schedule the other day. Truly one of America's experts on tropical diseases and vaccines.
Equity futures this morning, they advanced Tom up by 0.7% on the S&P 500. Positive 21 points, a mild lift to the equity market, a little bit more of a lift in the last 30 minutes or so.
Christopher Verone, an exceptionally terse paragraph today that we have not seen enough selling, that we've not seen enough emotion. He is very, very good at strategic research and technical analysis. Futures up 21, yields higher, 2.04%, 30-year bond. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This is a Bloomberg.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search out On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Wouldn't it be nice to keep things you normally lose? Your favourite scarf, your train of thought, or your mobile data. Because with most other networks, you get to the end of the month and your data is, well, never to be seen again. But unlike anyone else, with Sky Mobile, you can roll and keep all your unused data for up to 3 years. Sky Mobile. Hello, possible.
Full terms and conditions at sky.com/mobile.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Equity futures almost at session highs, positive 0.7% on the S&P 500, up by 22 points. In the bond market, treasuries lower, yields higher by 3, call it 4, maybe even 5 basis points. 2s out to 30s, up by 4 on 10s to 155 on 2s, up by a little more than 4 basis points to 1.357%. The data later, look out for 9:45 Eastern. Manufacturing PMI coming from market. This is the final read for the month of January. And at 10 a.m., 15 minutes later, 10 Eastern, ISM Manufacturing Time in focus.
ISM Manufacturing is a big deal. And I'm sort of surprised. 47.2 last. It's supposed to tick up. Yeah. I did not expect that.
Yeah, the survey is for 51.7. To me, it's interesting, though. I'm looking at this, right, or the 48.5, the survey. I'm just curious. We're going to get the read-through of the effect from what's going on in China.
Already?
Not yet.
Through the month of January? You don't think that we're going to get any potential effect?
The survey was cut off for the PMI. So for the China PMIs, the survey cut-off was January 20th. So the big effort to contain the virus didn't start till a few days after that. So we didn't see it in the China PMIs. I don't know what the survey cut-off is for this particular US PMI.
I'll do some research.
But I don't think we're really going to see the big impact, at least until next month's data, or rather this month's data.
All right. Well, this will be interesting nonetheless, just sort of understand the momentum heading into it, because we have seen, John, as you've been pointing out, the manufacturing out of Europe definitely disappointing and continuing to, as well as the one from China, before we even got the coronavirus disruption.
This is a joy. We haven't talked to Mickey Levy at some length here in a while, and it's important to do that now. He's with Berenberg Bank, but that barely describes his contribution to thinking about what central banks do. He's associated with the Shadow Open Market Committee. I'm not going to go into it all because of time, but the answer is back 30, 40, 50 years. There was a group concerned about flow dynamics and stock dynamics within the central bank and worried about rising prices. Dr. Levy, thank you so much for being with us today. There's this perennial call for inflation. Vice Chairman Clarida said to Bloomberg a few days ago, he sees us nearing a 2-ish inflation. Have we given up on the inflation watch? Is there inflation out there to worry about?
A little bit, Tom, but not really. I mean, nominal GDP growth, that is current dollar spending in the economy, is growing only modestly, so businesses really don't have much pricing power. It's really interesting and perplexing that the Fed is, still insistent that inflation goes up to 2%. The economy is really benefiting with the lower inflation. In fact, if you consider what's happening emanating out of China and with the sharply lower oil prices, that's going to flow through to lower energy prices, which benefits U.S. consumers. So what's wrong with that?
I mean, it's what's so important here, Mickey, and this goes to Javier Blas, I thought did a phenomenal job with Bloomberg Energy this morning of explaining this. All of a sudden, it's really become global, even if it's just a virus. And I don't mean to make light of the horrific damage this virus is doing. But what's the deflationary impulse you can gauge at Berenberg right now?
Not much of a deflationary impact, but Tom, the way I view what's going on in China is it's a negative supply shock. So it's in China, aggregate demand is going to decline. That is, people are going to save more. They're going to spend less. They're going to spend more on things they think are necessary, but they're going to spend much less on discretionary spending like autos and consumer electronics and the like, and this emanates around the world. Then on the production side of things, just the bottlenecks in supply chains and the disruptions, we really don't know the impact of this. But I would, firstly, the economy in China was weak to start with. And, the official numbers, they'll knock off a few tenths from GDP, but in reality, they're probably facing a near-term decline in GDP, and this is going to affect the world, particularly manufacturing, and yes, in the next couple months, we'll see it in the PMIs in Europe and Japan and the U.S.
Mickey, I want to pick up on the oil point, the idea that lower oil prices on the margins will actually give a boost to U.S. consumers. I've heard both arguments, and today we did see oil prices a little bit higher in the in the market. Now they're actually basically flat, $51.58 traded on the NYMEX, and I'm wondering how much the positive boost to consumers is offset by the negative income impact in the shale patch as we see an increasing amount of pressure on what had been the fastest growing or one of the fastest growing industries in the United States. I mean, how much is this a negative for the U.S. economy in a way it hadn't been in the past?
Okay, you're bringing out a great point. Now that the U.S. is net energy independent, the boost to consumers, and there is going to be a significant boost as the lower oil prices feed through to retail gasoline and home heating oil prices. That will be partially offset by a decline in capital spending in the oil patch, and so this is going to take a chunk out of capital spending in the GDP accounts.
Right.
But the consumers, it's 70% of GDP, and it's significantly positive.
Well, with your decades of perspective on inflation and standing ready to fight inflation, what does the next marginal rate cut do? I mean, we've had some experience with this recently. Are you proposing a rate cut is efficacious here, Mickey?
No, absolutely not. Look, if we think about what's been hitting the economy even before this virus, the decline in global trade volumes, uncertainties in Europe, et cetera, all of these have nothing to do with monetary policy. And so to ease further, like the ECB and the Fed did last year, while the BOJ continues with its QE, it has no impact other than to boost asset prices, stock prices, increase income and wealth inequality. It really, if you think of the channels through which monetary policy is supposed to affect the economy, this is going to have no impact. And so central banks, the Fed, of course, is all over this. They'll sit pat here and they'll talk about the reduction in inflation that's coming. It'll be temporary, and that'll be the right move, just to hold still.
All right. So there's the reaction function of the Federal Reserve, but there's also a question of just how significant this economic shock is going to be. Just based on what you've seen, the idea that entire cities of 50 billion people have been completely shut down in China. Do you think that markets are accurately pricing in the economic shock that has already happened, let alone what potentially could happen if this virus continues to cause shutdowns and travel impairments?
Once again, a great question. We don't fully know the answer to it. You saw China overnight down 8%. I think this is a major body blow to China that is going to have a lingering impact on their economy. And of course, their official economic data really don't, add up to what's happening in reality. In the U.S., we've had a decline in the stock market. I think what this will do is this is definitely going to accentuate the decline in global trade. It's going to really cause bottlenecks in global production. The PMIs, it's going to delay any pickup. Eventually, things will bounce back. But we should not take so lightly the economics of this, because it's really going to have an impact.
I mean, what do your European compatriots say about the ECB then? John Farrell mentioned this, 20 minutes ago or so. Maybe you say the Fed will wait and finesse it. They won't cut rates. What does ECB do?
We should hope they're realistic about this, Tom. The ECB already has their policy rate at minus 50 basis points, and they're flooding their economy with liquidity. Do you think further negative rates are going to help everybody through this? Well,
let's cut to the chase here, Mickey. You're helping with an important panel March 6th in honor of Marvin Goodfriend, who just tragically died at Carnegie Mellon. His great statement was the amplitude of negative rates. Do we need to get braver, a la Goodfriend to Jackson Hole, and imply a greater negative rate to clear the markets?
I don't think so, Tom. I don't think the problem here is markets. The U.S. is actually very well positioned here. The U.S. consumer and housing are doing well. There's no question but that the production side of the economy, industrial production's declining a bit, and that's going to show up in the ISM that's heavily weighted toward export orders. But all in all, the U.S. economy is actually moving along the path that the Fed had predicted and moving along potential growth. Yeah. So the Fed should just be sitting here. And keep in mind, the federal funds rate is 0 in inflation-adjusted terms, and there's more than enough liquidity in the market. So through all this angst, we have to hope that the Fed, takes an even keel and says these are temporary impacts, even if they last a couple quarters.
Very cool. Mickey Levy, thank you so much with Berenberg Bank. That's great to have John Riding in the previous audience and Dr. Levy here to
very cool.
Some really different perspectives as well. What do you see over there? You're very quiet.
Very quiet. Getting ready for the day ahead, getting ready for the market open.
What are you going to do at the open at 9
minutes time? Troy Gajewski joining us from Skybridge. Looking forward to catching up with him about what we're seeing in the fixed income markets, Tom, and in credit as well.
Is there a feeling that there was a lot of carnage in equity, total returns, alternative investment damage the other day?
I don't think we should use the word carnage. No, we had a move of 2% last week.
Yeah, I agree.
Talk about carnage in China overnight.
7%, but that's catching up over how many days was it closed?
Honestly, I think
a week.
Yeah, good point.
It's also though interesting that you're not seeing more of a move in credit because people said that it was priced to perfection, and you're seeing spreads widen a bit, but not that much.
Still widened by about 80 basis points.
Yeah,
I think it's a sizable move.
Yes, but if you look at where yields were, where spreads were at the end of the year, I mean, they'd already jacketed in. It was really a pretty big rally earlier. So
dollar yen 108.56. Now with the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, John, Lisa, thank you very much. Chinese scientists say they have more evidence the coronavirus that recently emerged in China likely originated in bats. In 2 papers published today in the journal Nature, scientists report that the genome sequences from several patients in Wuhan show the virus is closely related to the viruses that causes SARS. Scientists suspect the latest virus outbreak in China began at a seafood market in Wuhan where wild animals were on sale and in contact with people. The Senate impeachment trial of President Trump reconvenes this morning with closing arguments. After that, senators will deliver speeches on the Senate floor giving their take on the trial. President Trump said that he thought it would be hard to work with Democrats after they tried to remove him from office. In an interview that aired on Fox TV ahead of Sunday's Super Bowl, the president added the impeachment trial has been unfair to him.
Mostly it was unfair to my family. I mean, my family suffered because of all of this, and many other families suffered also. It was it's a very serious thing. It should never happen to another president.
Trump also criticized House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and other Democrats. Political analysts say it looks like anybody's race heading into tonight's Iowa caucuses. After the latest poll from Emerson College, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders leads with 28%. He spoke last night in Des Moines.
We're going to bring our people together around an agenda that works for all of us, not just the 1%.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is second in the poll with 21%. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. Michael Barr, this is Bloomberg, Tom.
Michael, thanks so much. Did you get El Arian his tickets for the Super Bowl? He was out on social. Did you see Dr. El Arian's seats?
Yes.
Wow.
They were amazing.
They weren't like 50-yard line row 3 where you can't see Shakira and J-Lo. He had the rock star seats. He was on the 48-yard line.
You're being a little bit unfair.
Oh, come on. He's on the 48-yard line up about 40.
But in the nosebleeds.
No, that's not
nosebleeds. Come on.
John, that's nosebleeds for the tots. It's not nosebleeds.
Behind where the cameramen were at the top. I saw the picture.
It was rock star. Michael, it was like to die for.
You're winding him up, aren't you?
It was to die for.
I think you're trying to cause trouble. Michael, advice, don't get involved. I know what you're up to.
It's okay.
Just trying to cause a little bit of trouble.
I saw the pole dance too. It was good.
Yeah. Oh, really?
What is going on with you?
This is a family radio program.
It was a great halftime show.
Oh, thank you, Michael Bart. This is Bloomberg.
What's the pole dance?
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Is it better to rent or to buy? Data from CJ Patrick and First American Data Tree show It's just about a 50-50 proposition right now, with the equation favoring buyers in some relatively affordable metros right now, including Memphis, Birmingham, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Atlanta, along with Tampa and Miami. But better for renters in Denver, Providence, Portland, Seattle, Salt Lake City, and the major California metros of San Francisco, San Jose, Los Angeles, and San Diego. Even so, Rick Sharga, CEO of CJ Patrick, says in those cities, nothing is really cheap.
It's almost unaffordable to buy or to rent. So it's not cheap, whatever you do.
The median rent in San Jose about $2,300. And as for buying, factor in monthly mortgage payments plus taxes and insurance, and the median monthly payment there in San Jose about $4,900. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Connect.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
This is the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry he wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time he hops on a bus. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are rising while European shares have been drifting a bit following steep losses at the end of last week and as investors monitor the international response to the coronavirus outbreak. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 19 points. The Dow futures up 145. NASDAQ futures up 65. The DAX in Germany's up 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 10/30 seconds. Yield 1.54%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.35%. NYMEX crude oil down 1/3% or 18 cents at 51.38 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1/3% or $5.50 at 15.8240 an ounce. The euro 1.1064 against the dollar. British pound 1.3054, and the yen is at 108.56. Watching shares of Gilead Sciences up 4.5% this morning. A new antiviral drug from Gilead is being tested to treat the coronavirus. And food distributor Cisco reporting second quarter profit that beat analyst estimates. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that, Karen. Right now in Des Moines, and of course with a long, long day ahead, Kevin Cerulli joins us now to our 10 p.m. coverage tonight on the caucus. Kevin, what happened over the weekend? Just sum up for people distracted by all the other issues of the Bloomberg world. What happened over the weekend in Iowa?
This is Bernie Sanders to lose. That's the top line view. And if he were to finish second or third in this, it would be portrayed as a failure of the Sanders campaign. An Emerson poll came out, has him up by about 4 to 5 percentage points over Joe Biden. The other, I mean, if you want to get into the weeds, there was this legacy poll that the Des Moines Register does here that was canceled because Buttigieg wasn't on it. And that, to political junkies here in Des Moines, they all cared about that. I've got my eye on who finishes third, because that really will set the stage for one, who is a viable alternative to Joe Biden should he falter, but also two, it puts pressure on the other candidates to drop out of the race.
Kevin, how much does this put pressure on Senator Warren, the idea that she was the front runner for the far left contingency from the populist contingency, that she's lost ground so significantly to Bernie Sanders?
You're absolutely right. I mean, she needs to finish strong in order to really be able to justify her candidacy moving forward. Bernie Sanders benefited from the Hillary Clinton Hulu documentary criticisms that Hillary lodged his way. He benefited from Senator Sanders and that spat on the debate stage, and he's really proven politically Teflon in that regard. The question for Warren is, where do her supporters go? Where does she go? Does she make an endorsement? Who does she endorse? That's where the endorsements, of course, will get more interesting here. And you guys both know this from covering this for so long, is that this is where the backroom deals really start to emerge, and the subtext and the interactions between the campaigns and their staffers really start to get
what
even
kind
more
of backroom deal? Who gets to buy coffee at the coffee shop in Des Moines? What kind of deal?
Vice president.
What vice president, secretary of state? What role their staff gets to play in administration?
Aren't they getting a little out front of the debate?
No. Absolutely, but this is what
I live for. Hey, this is why I'm in Des Moines. And also, I mean, you saw this floated by Bernie Sanders when he suggested that Senator Elizabeth Warren, he would consider her to be vice president, but also a double whammy and have her be Treasury Secretary. So that's where all of those conversations will start to be had.
Let's talk about Bernie Sanders versus President Trump. And in a matchup like that, what are the chances that Bernie Sanders could win?
Well, his supporters would say, both of their supporters would say they'd win. I think what it would be interesting is that Bernie Sanders beat Hillary Clinton in Michigan, which is a state that President Trump carried. And so when you go to Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and I know this is against the political narrative and the East Coast narrative, there is a very much real reality of independent voters who swing between the parties, who like Bernie Sanders and like Donald Trump. And those are the same type of voters who switched from Obama to Trump in the last election. There's 70,000 of them in America. And look, I mean, I think it would be more competitive, I think, than candidly a lot of our industry thinks.
What's so important here within the makeup of Iowa, and I have real trouble with people looking at Iowa as one view, the difference from Sioux County to Johnson County is ginormous.
Huge.
How has the state changed
Hispanics,
in 3.5 years?
Hispanics, and this is what I would say is that I hear you, Tom, on your point about Iowa. And look, this is a state that Trump carried by 10 percentage points. So I hear you on that. That said, it's a test still for organization and for institutional structure, and whether or not you can get out the vote and move folks to the polls and coalition building. It's a test. It's a test. Yeah. Bernie Sanders was able to rally Hispanics. If Bernie Sanders performs big tonight, everyone's going to say it's because of the youth vote. Maybe, but it's also because of Hispanic. Watch Hispanic vote turnout.
This is really, really important, Lisa. I know you're a farm girl out of Fargo and the years you spent in Fargo, but the answer is the stereotype of Iowa is either did wrestling at Iowa State or you went to the Iowa Writers Workshop at University of Iowa and
wrote
the novel you never wrote, or you went to the fair, as Kevin mentions. And I just think there's more going on here than just a stereotype of Iowa.
Without a doubt. And I do have to wonder, though, how much this year's caucus is complicated by the fact that there were 20 some odd members up on that stage in the first initial debates. How much does the crowded field cloud the sort of prophecy of this particular caucus, given the fact that people haven't gotten to know the candidates perhaps as intimately as they would have if the field were smaller?
Lisa, I don't want to sound cliche because I think everybody says this, but I got to be really frank here. I was at some rallies yesterday and I was talking to the voters and they're undecided. And they take their job so incredibly seriously. This is probably the one part between here and New Hampshire, but even more so here, where the caucus goers, if they haven't shook hands or shaken hands with every candidate, they don't know them. If they haven't met them, if they haven't seen them, if they haven't heard them, they're not going to vote for them. So to your point, because there were so many candidates, it made their jobs harder to do. Now that the field has winnowed a bit, it's coming down to there's for many voters that I spoke with, it's an electability argument. Who do they think can actually beat Trump? But also, then you talk to progressives in the base, and it's, who do they think the country?
Do you and the political junkies out there realize there was a football game yesterday?
I do. So I was at 801. Tom, I don't know if you know 801. That's the best steakhouse here in Des Moines.
I'm shocked.
And I'm eating a
Sounds
filet.
like you're really roughing it there.
I'm having, a filet from Des Moines, the best steak in the country. And I was eating some mac and cheese. Next thing I know, I look up and Shakira and J-Lo are on the screen. And Andy Reid won. I'm not an Andy Reid fan, but I got to give him credit. Congrats to Andy Reid.
Well, I mean, he was the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles.
But he lost.
Ago, right?
He couldn't win us a Super Bowl, Tom. I'm still bitter.
All right, not so bitter that you were eating a steak and enjoying the sort of enjoyment between Shakira and J-Lo. So
good and
we're crying
day,
for you.
Of course, special coverage tonight, 10 p.m. with Mr. Cirilli. Mr. Weston rumored to be in Iowa as well, and they'll have some. We're going to do it differently, folks. Some good conversations as we go from Iowa, and then immediately move forward in the first, I believe, 4 primaries. Caucuses as well. Futures up 19, Dow futures up 141. Your yield 1.35%, the 10-year back to a 154. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Listen, we know you're not here for ads, but while you're waiting for the music, cybercriminals might be waiting for you to expose your login credentials and payment information over Wi-Fi. Help keep your online activity private with Norton 360. It gives you multiple layers of protection, including secure VPN with bank-grade encryption, device security, password manager, and PC cloud backup. Go to uk.norton.com to get all-in-one protection starting at $24.99 for your first year. Terms apply. That's uk.norton.com.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Heading for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores! A Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize how good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, thank you for being with us. We're going to get to David Wilson in a moment. Very important first stock discussion today, particularly on China. But the lift to the market, up 18, Dow futures up 131. I thought Chris Verone, the technical analyst, Paul Sweeney at Strategas, was brilliant, where he just said, look, quantitatively, we haven't had any sense of catharsis, even if we had a difficult Friday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you think about some of the ramifications of the coronavirus as it may impact growth, not just in China, but maybe global growth overall. We haven't seen that much pullback in the market here, so I think the market's a little bit of a wait and see.
Very good. Let's do this. It's so important, a statement from David Wilson on Gilead Sciences. This is a biotech company, David, that's changed its stripes a number of times over the year. There's been a little bit of litigation, but they're in the business of really esoteric virology and microbiology, aren't they?
Right, and the story today is that China is running an accelerated trial of one of the company's drugs as a possible treatment for coronavirus. The trial is going to be conducted in the city of Wuhan, where the viral outbreak began. And you've got Gilead up more than 4% in early trading. It's one of the most active stocks. And then we turn to Tesla, up 3.5%. The electric car maker's battery plant in Nevada turned profitable in the December quarter. That's according to Tesla's partner in the factory, Japan's Panasonic. The profit occurred 3 months earlier than Panasonic had forecast. Nike's up 2%. The athletic wear retailer was raised to buy for neutral at UBS and added to a list of top picks at JP Morgan. Both calls were made in advance of a new product forum set for Wednesday. L Brands, though, down 1.5%. The New York Times reported yesterday that the retailer's Victoria's Secret unit suffered from, quote, an entrenched culture of misogyny, bullying, and harassment. The report cited more than 30 interviews along with court filings and other documents. You got one company in the S&P 500 that reported earnings today so far, Cisco. That's the food service company. SYSCO.
SYSCO.
It's down 1.5% as well. Cisco was less profitable in the fiscal second quarter than analysts expected, according to a Bloomberg survey, and revenue came up just short of estimates. Some more analyst calls. Northrop Grumman down 3%. The defense contractor was lowered to sell from buy at Goldman Sachs. Monster Beverage up 2.5%. The energy drink maker was raised equivalent buy from hold at Morgan Stanley. And Seagate Technology also up 2.5%. The disk drive maker was raised to buy from hold at Stifel. Roku's up 3%. The streaming video company reached a distribution deal with Fox late Friday that allowed subscribers to watch the Super Bowl. Roku fell Friday by 7.4% in the absence of a deal. So a bit of a recovery there. PG&E up 6.5%. The California utility outlined plans late Friday to overhaul its board, bring in safety experts, and form regional operating units. The moves are designed to gain state approval to exit Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And some smaller companies with big moves. One of them's Insmed. It's up 48.5%. The drug maker says proposed treatment for a bronchial ailment met the main goal of a second stage study. And Immune Therapeutics up 16.5%. U.S. regulators approved the company's drug for peanut allergies late Friday.
I need to start investing in biotech stocks, just the right biotech tech stocks.
That's the challenge, Paul. Absolutely. As far as the immune drug goes, data combined by Bloomberg show analysts expect $1.2 billion in annual sales by 2024. And unfortunately, I have to mention JCPenney. The shares are down a couple of percent. They're at 73 cents right now.
They're under $1. I didn't know that.
Yes, and that's the problem. The retailer was notified late Friday by the New York Stock Exchange that its listing is at risk. The NYSE requires companies to have at least a $1 share price.
Paul,
$238 million is the market cap of this company.
To our listeners, and frankly to our next guest, Arthur Levitt, Paul, how does a company just go on and on and on like that?
It's extraordinary. I mean, you've got inventory, you've got real estate, you've got, the operations across the country.
Put it out of their
misery?
Exactly.
The department store story has been written. These guys are the poster child for, what can go wrong if you don't manage the transition well. It's just extraordinary. Tom, so, we talked to Arthur Levitt, Tom. Really the theme has been developing over the last couple of years of a deregulatory Securities and Exchange Commission. We got some more news on that front. The SEC is proposing changes to rules governing how companies disclose financial information. Arthur Levitt, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. So, Arthur, again, the theme we've had with you is this SEC under this administration is less regulatory. What's going on now?
Well, that's true. It's up and down throughout the commission. Now the president has already moved to ease compliance with the Volcker rule when he agreed that the biggest banks would no longer have to prove to regulators that trades held for less than 60 days weren't made for the firm's own short-term profit or otherwise prohibited. And what we're seeing up and down the line is an easing of regulations in this environment. And this awaits the next crisis, because when that occurs, all of these deregulatory findings are going to be reversed, and we'll go back to where we were when they were instituted during the last crisis period of the early 90s.
And Tom, you know what's amazing just about this? We were just talking before Arthur came on, was the passing of Bernie Ebbers, the former CEO of WorldCom. You talk about accounting fraud, Arthur. I mean, the timing is kind of interesting, isn't it, for people of a certain age?
It really is, and this is what we see. We see this deregulatory push until the next scandal appears, and then those regulations will be put on and amplified.
I mean, Paul's a lot better at this, Arthur, than I am. I pretend to be pretty ignorant of this. Sandy Peterson.
But you've got a good memory, Tom.
Well, I got a good memory on Mr. Ebbers and the train wreck that, was WorldCom and all that. What I see here, Arthur, in our important conversations with you is it's not on one front. It is an SEC on multiple fronts with a theory, with a belief. What's that belief?
That belief is that this is the best of all possible worlds. Therefore, we really don't have to spend much time amping up SEC regs.
Have we been here? But I mean, Arthur's like,
of course we've been.
Arthur's like cruising 2006.
Yes.
So, Arthur, is there a valid? Is there any pushback in the SEC that you're aware of on this move?
You wouldn't hear it from this distance, and I'm sure some of the people at the commission who remember the tough times that we've been through before these regs were put on are saying to themselves, "Go carefully, because we've been down this road before." And this is a cycle, and it's a cycle that doesn't change and won't change. So one of these days, we're going to wake up to a fraud or a scandal, and we're going to reimpose many of these regulations plus a few new ones to boot.
Arthur Levitt, thank you so much this morning, the former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission. And folks, this has been a theme. Whatever you believe in a weaker SEC, a stronger SEC, more vigilant, individual investor, or whatever, we're just here to debate it and talk about it. But certainly, Paul, it's been a theme. I go back to 04, 05, and I've always given credit to Simon Johnson, who had a lovely, important little book out, 13 Bankers, and I think it's chapter 6, where at the beginning of it, he cites a certain June or July day, and I believe it was 04 or 06, where the SEC changed the rules, and they allowed for leverage up.
Yeah.
That's all. And it's been cited in other books. It's not unique to Professor Johnson, but there's almost an attitude. And then there's one moment which usually you don't see until hindsight.
It's interesting. It's you think about the financial crisis, which was a defining moment financially and economically for most of us in our lifetime, and the lessons that were learned and the regulations that came upon the financial services industry, for example. But some of those, it feels, we're 10 plus years on from that now, and it seems like a lot of that's starting to recede a little bit. We're certainly, or I guess you could certainly say at the SEC starting to pull back a little bit from some of those rules.
Futures up 17, Dow futures up 135. It's a risk-on feel. Don't want to make too much about it. The risk-on feel is correlated. We see it. Well, I stand corrected. Curve flattening, actually, ever so slightly. So it's not 100% correlated, but it's there. Oil, 51.29. Lots of talk on oil this morning. Edward Morse scheduled to be with us with Citigroup as well. Right now with the news, New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. The Iowa caucuses take place tonight. On the eve of the caucus, presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders stopped by a Super Bowl watch party in Des Moines. Sanders says it's imperative to defeat President Trump.
We don't need a president who thrives on divisiveness, thrives on trying to divide us up. And my promise to you that as president, our administration will bring our people together.
Today, the Senate will hold closing arguments in President Trump's impeachment trial. Tomorrow, the president gives his State of the Union address. Then the Senate is expected to take its final vote on impeachment on Wednesday. Trump will likely be cleared mostly along party lines. There are now 11 people in the U.S. infected with the coronavirus, the mysterious virus that first appeared in Wuhan, China. It has killed more than 300 people in China and one person in the Philippines. An estimated 14,000 have come down with the virus amid fears thousands more could develop symptoms of high fever and respiratory problems. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Uzbekistan today on the last leg of his trip to Eastern Europe and Central Asia was asked about evacuating additional Americans from China.
We have a handful more flights that will be heading to China to bring Americans back home from Hubei province. The exact timing of those, we're still coordinating with the Chinese government, but we anticipate that they will happen in the next handful of days, and we'll return those American citizens. We may well end up bringing some citizens back from other countries as well.
Israel says it will make fighting the virus worldwide a top priority. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Look at the yield market again. Yields higher. Currency market. Dollar stronger, looking at DXY blended out 97.74 on a stronger dollar. Yen 108.53. I'm going to call that churning. Euro churning 110.59. Over the last couple of days, we've had stronger yen, weaker euro, but don't want to oversell that. And renminbi, of course, trading now off of the lunar. There is offshore yuan. There is onshore yuan. I usually quote onshore, but I'm quoting offshore because it traded through the viral crisis, and there we, of course, saw weaker yuan. We see that with a vengeance this morning with renminbi trading 7.0185, rounded 702 is a weaker renminbi over the last week and a half, I'll say, out from 6.9394, out over nicely over 7.02 yuan.
Data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Influential. Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with B.
Bike.
Nope. Banana tree.
Oh, of course. We must have missed it.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Drive carbon neutral by filling up and using Shell Go Plus today. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. stock index futures are on the rise this morning, while European shares, they've been drifting, but now they're gaining pretty much as well. This is following steep losses at the end of last week, and as investors monitor the international response to the coronavirus outbreak. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 17 points. The Dow futures up 130. NASDAQ futures up about 52. The DAX in Germany is up almost 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 7/32, yield 1.53%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.34%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.8% or 40 cents at 51.18 a barrel, and COMEX gold is down 1/3% or $5.20 at 15.8270 an ounce. The euro 1.1057 against the dollar, British pound 1.3033, and the yen is at 108.52. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Brent Schutte with us now with Northwestern Mutual. Thrilled you could be with us. Brent, buried in your note is a really, really important theme, which just because of news flow I haven't touched on, and now's a good time. And that is last year, flows were mostly into fixed income and coupon items. Is it correct to say last year, even with the stunning equity move, there wasn't that much money flowing into stocks. Is that true?
Sure, that is actually true. If you look at actually flows last year, most of the money went into fixed income and money market funds. And so if you go back and you take a look at money market funds, around 2009, they were about $3.7 trillion in assets. During the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it's pretty consistent around 2.5. And then last year, 2018, 2019, as people really worried about the end of the cycle, they worried about a recession, those assets and money funds increased back to $3.7 trillion. And so there was a lot of flows. This has been a doubted rally for most of the last 5, 6, 7 years. And people have continually worried about a recession, which we still think is a long ways off.
So, Paul, with all your history, I know we're interviewing Brent, but right now I'm interviewing Paul Sweeney. What's it mean if this is still a market unloved? Like you're telling me we're not putting money into the market, Paul?
It's interesting. We're seeing some decent earnings this quarter, particularly out of some of the big tech companies, which just kind of continues the theme of this market has some legs here. It's now arguably going to be driven by earnings growth in 2020. But Brent, are we overthinking this? Should we just say to ourselves, the Fed is easing, the Fed is accommodative, the global central banks are accommodative, and that's all I need to worry about?
Yeah, I think there's a big part of that. So the bigger picture to me is that the Fed usually ends every economic cycle, and the Fed has completely shifted over the past couple of years. So the Fed used to be an inflation fighter, and to do that, they moderated the cycle. Now they're an inflation enhancer, and to do that, they extend the cycle. The old Fed never thought they could do anything about the differences between the haves and the have-nots. That was a fiscal policy area. Now, if you listen to Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, they talk about how they can help cure that by letting the cycle run longer. And most importantly, the old Fed, in my estimation, didn't really worry about markets for the sake of the economy. They thought that was the bigger, broader thing, was the economy was their mandate, not the markets. Last year, the Fed started listening to the markets, and they eased when the market changed, not when their forecast changed. And so I do believe the Fed has a big impact on what happens. And right now there is no cure for the coronavirus, but there certainly is an economy filled with a lot of stimulus that I think will eventually overwhelm those virus fears.
Is it a time to look at small cap stocks? One of the themes that we've seen coming into 2020, some strategists have been suggesting that, this might be the year for small cap stocks to catch up.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's not so much small cap or mid cap, Paul. It's the 6 stocks that are going to the moon.
Exactly.
Brett, is it time to not own Tesla?
Yeah. I don't know about Tesla per se, but I do know there are a lot of correlated trades based upon the end of the cycle right now. And so small versus large is the same as value versus growth, is the same as international versus the U.S. And I think if you think back last year, we kind of had a chicken little rally. It was in the defensives because leading economic indicators were moving down because we had the trade war fears and we had the prior tightening. I think as you look into this year, as we get past these fears, this too will end, you have a lot of stimulus pulsing through the veins of the economy. You have the trade war, which I believe will continue to tamp down. It is an election year. And I do think those LEIs will move up, not only in the U.S., but globally, and that will eventually cause small value and international likely to outperform after underperforming for many, many years.
Not that Northwestern Mutual wants you to do this, but nobody's listening. Are you buying the dip this morning, Brett?
Well, unfortunately, we have to think a little bit longer term. But
okay, Friday?
If I had money to put to work, I would not be afraid to put the money to work, especially in some of those more cyclical areas that have sold off so much more heavily than some of those more defensive areas the past few weeks. Utilities have rallied while everything else is pretty fallen. REITs are kind of in that bucket too. And so, we are tilting our portfolio more towards cyclical exposure over defensive exposure.
So, Brent, it is an election year. Do I care as an investor?
I always go back, and I've been doing this for 25 years now, and I always talk about how I've had clients on both sides of the aisle, and so it seems like every election someone is unhappy, and I guess the point would be that, today we're higher than at all those different points of the election. I think you do care more from a sector, industry perspective. That's where I feel administrations have an impact. From an overall U.S. economy perspective, I do think that, the U.S. economy is $20 trillion bigs with checks and balances, with people who make business plans longer than 4 years. And so I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't care, and we will see volatility probably coming up if, the caucuses go a certain way, et cetera. But I do think the bigger picture, longer term, is still bright no matter which party wins.
Brett, thanks for the update. Brett Schutte with Northwestern Mutual today. Some smart concepts there as well. Did Fox win the Super Bowl?
I haven't seen the ratings, but it was a great competitive game right down to the end. So if you're an advertiser who bought some ad time in the fourth quarter, that was good value.
Which Fox is Fox, like sports and, TV and news and all that?
FOX, this is the standalone kind of this is what Rupert Murdoch kept. He sold about 2/3 of the company to Disney. That was the film studio and the movie studio and some of the international stuff.
This is the company in succession.
Yes, this is exactly right. This is the Fox television network, the Fox cable network, the Fox business network, all that good stuff. And so they had the rights this year, did a great job, had tons of programming, sold out all their ad time. I think the average was $5.6 million for a 30-second spot, just another record. So advertisers, by and large, still want to reach those big audience. Let's call it 100 million people watch the game